Chapter 427. Ji Tianqing stood in the ruins with an unyielding expression as he looked up at the bloody Azura. Even though his heart was filled with rage and unwillingness, he was powerless now that his true essence was exhausted. The strength of Ghost Eye's strength and the strangeness of his moves far exceeded his imagination. After all, he only had a strength at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage. Whereas Ghost Eye's strength had already reached the peak of the 9th level of the Origin Core stage, and was a half-step Heaven Origin stage expert. Him being able to exchange so many moves with Ghost Eye and persist until now was already extraordinary and inconceivable. In the next moment, the bloody Azura raised his enormous foot high up and fiercely stomped down. Ji Tianqing was powerless to resist, nor was he able to fly or dodge. He could only use the last trace of his strength to desperately run forward. Bang! Amidst the deafening noise, his figure was covered by the bloody Azura's enormous foot and vanished. The wasteland ruins was stomped into dust that filled the sky, and the entire gorge trembled and shook. Muffled rumbling sounds echoed intensely in the gorge and didn't disappear for a long time. After a short moment, the bloody Azura raised his enormous foot, and an enormous footprint appeared on the ground like a deep pit. Ji Tianqing was lying at the bottom of the deep pit, injured and unconscious since long ago, and his consciousness had entered the boundless darkness. The Kenshin battle robe had already vanished and returned to his body. The star armor lost the support of true essence and transformed back into a silver ball that rolled down beside him. An enormous violet light formation appeared on the ground and enveloped the bloody Azura's figure. The bloody Azura's figure dispersed within the violet light and was quickly swallowed by the violet light formation. Swoosh! The gorge returned to calm, and Ghost Eye's figure appeared and descended at the edge of the pit. He stretched out his hand and struck out a bloody light that grabbed Ji Tianqing from the bottom of the pit. When he was about to turn around and leave, he suddenly thought of something and struck out another bloody light that scooped up the silver ball that was the star armor. Subsequently, Ghost Eye carried Ji Tianqing out of the gorge and ascended the peak of the mountain on the right side of the gorge. On the peak of the mountain, there was an enormous pitch-black devil crow that had always been waiting on the spot. Ghost Eye rode on the demon crow and rushed back to the demon cave. A few hours later, the demon crow flew back to the Misty Moon Mountain Range, 600 miles east of the Spirit Flame City, and landed outside the demon cave. Shwa! Ghost Eye jumped down from the back of the demonic crow. He waved his hand and shot out a bloody light, which engulfed the huge demonic crow. He dragged the unconscious Ji Tianqing and walked into the cave with large strides. In the dimly lit cave, the Blood Demon King sat on the blood essence stone praying mat with his eyes closed. He was using some kind of secret technique. The high priest stood silently in the corner of the cave, resting with his eyes closed. Granny Ghost was not in the cave. Ghost Eye walked into the cave with a cold expression and came before Blood Demon King. Plap! He casually tossed the unconscious Ji Tianqing to the ground, cupped his hands, and reporting to Lord Demon King, this subordinate has fulfilled his mission and has captured Ji Tianqing. Hearing this, the Blood Demon King immediately opened his eyes. His eyes flashed with a cold light as well as a strong sense of joy. That's great! Ghost Eye, you have done very well. You are indeed worthy of being this king's most valued demon general. You can go back and rest. The Blood Demon King's expression was a little excited. He stared at the unconscious Ji Tianqing like a hungry wolf that had seen a lamb. The high priest also opened his eyes with a face full of smiles. He sneered with anticipation. Lord Demon King, our great plan of revival has taken another big step. That's right. The Blood Demon King nodded and said in a serious tone, this king wants to take his Kenshin bloodline. When the Demon King reappears in the world, I will give him a big gift. Then, he grabbed Ji Tianqing with his big hand and walked into the depths of the cave. In the deepest part of the cave, there was a stone door carved into the rock wall. Behind the door was a simple stone room that had been carved out temporarily. It was Granny Ghost's residence. 6 hours ago, Granny Ghost had already set up the Burning Soul Blood Dissipation Array in the stone room. On the dark rock floor, there were 3 huge skulls. This was the core of the Burning Soul Blood Dissipation Array. It was also specially prepared to extract Ji Tianqing's Kenshin bloodline. The Blood Demon King pushed open the stone door and walked into the secret room with Ji Tianqing. Granny Ghost, Ji Tianqing has been captured. Granny Ghost stared at the unconscious Ji Tianqing and sneered. Ha ha ha, that's great. Blood Demon King, among the 3 demon generals under your command, only Ghost Eye can take on the big responsibility. The Blood Demon King also showed a playful smile and nodded. So, Only he survived and brought Ji Tianqing back. Granny Ghost, how are your preparations? Granny Ghost nodded and said in a proud tone, this old one is ready. You just need to wait patiently. Leave the rest to this old one. Okay, thank you for your trouble. The Blood Demon King threw Ji Tianqing on the ground and turned to leave the secret room. Granny Ghost walked to Ji Tianqing's side with her dove-headed walking stick and looked at him condescendingly. Ha! Little bastard, you still fell into this old one's hands. As she spoke, her left hand pinched a spell and shot out a few blue soul fires to seal Ji Tianqing's true essence. Then, she took out a bronze cauldron from her interspatial ring and placed it on the burning soul blood dissipation array in the middle of the secret room. This bronze cauldron had 3 legs and 6 ears. Its whole body was dark red, as if it was covered with a layer of dried and solidified blood. The body of the cauldron was engraved with patterns of ferocious demons and ghosts. It was also engraved with dense array patterns. It looked extremely gloomy and evil. Granny Ghost stretched out her dove-headed walking stick and gently flicked it. Ji Tianqing flew up and fell into the bronze cauldron. The lid of the cauldron closed with a clang, suppressing Ji Tianqing inside the bronze cauldron. Granny Ghost started to cast a spell to activate the burning soul blood dissipation array, preparing to extract Ji Tianqing's Kenshin bloodline. She walked around the dark red bronze cauldron in a strange way. After a while, the burning soul blood dissipation array was activated. The 3 skulls on the ground all lit up with red light and opened their eyes strangely. The whole secret room was filled with dark red bloodlight and was filled with a thick smell of blood. Granny Ghost pinched a spell with her left hand and continuously shot out balls of blue soul fires into the bronze cauldron. Her right hand kept waving her dove-headed walking stick, releasing a thick black fog into the bronze cauldron. The bronze cauldron gradually changed. It lit up with blue flames and dark red bloodlight. Granny Ghost kept casting a secret spell, releasing powerful demonic power and soul fires, turning the bronze cauldron into a furnace of souls and bloodline. She wanted to use this heaven origin treasure, the soul refining cauldron, to refine Ji Tianqing's soul and bloodline and extract his Kenshin bloodline. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. The power of the burning soul blood dissipation array and the soul refining cauldron were activated to the extreme. Ji Tianqing was imprisoned in the soul refining cauldron. His soul was in a coma and still hadn't woken up. At this time, Granny Ghost stopped and sneered complacently. In 2 days, the soul refining cauldron will extract the Kenshin bloodline. Chapter 428. Granny Ghost left the secret room and returned to the demon cave. Seeing Blood Demon King sitting on the blood essence stone, she walked over with the dove head staff. Blood Demon King quickly looked at her and asked expectantly, Granny Ghost, how is it? Granny Ghost nodded and smiled. Everything is going well. My soul refining cauldron is refining that kid's soul and bloodline. No matter how strong his soul is or how strong his will is, he won't be able to last 2 days. Within 2 days, you will obtain the Kenshin bloodline that you've been dreaming of. Very good. Blood Demon King nodded with satisfaction. At this time, Ghost I had already cultivated for a few hours and had recovered. He walked to the front of the Blood Demon King expressionlessly. After cupping his hands, he presented a spatial ring and a silver ball. Lord Demon King, this is what I obtained from Ji Tianqing. Oh. Blood Demon King raised his eyebrows and took the space ring and silver ball. He carefully examined them. After studying them for a while, he threw the silver ball to Ghost Eye. Ghost Eye, this is a heaven origin grade armor. This king will give it to you. Thank you, Lord Demon King. Ghost Eye expressed his gratitude and took the star armor. Blood Demon King used a secret technique to break the seal on the space ring and quickly opened it. He searched for a while and saw many spirit pills and spirit stones, as well as materials for alchemy, equipment forging, and talismans. Finally, he found a token in the space ring. The Blood Demon King took out the token and looked at it. Suddenly, his eyes glowed brightly. This should be Ji Tianqing's identity token. With this token, things will be much easier. Humph. Blood Demon King sneered and threw the sky-raising token to Ghost Eye. Ghost Eye, this king has an even more difficult task for you. Ghost Eye held the sky-raising token with both hands and respectfully said, Please instruct me, Lord Demon King. The Blood Demon King sneered and said in a low voice, Ghost Eye, you have the talent of the demonic shadow 100 transformations. You can change into other people's appearance without any flaws. This king orders you to transform into Ji Tianqing's appearance. Take his identity token and enter the sky-bearing sect as him. Wait for an opportunity to assassinate Chu Tianqing. At this point, the Blood Demon King's eyes and tone became extremely evil and sinister. Chu Tianqing is the second strongest person in the sky-bearing sect. He is also the sect master who controls the overall situation. If you can seriously injure him, our plan will be foolproof. Ji Tianqing is Chu Tianqian's direct disciple. Chu Tiantian will definitely not be on guard against him. You have a very high chance of success. When Granny Ghost heard this, she was surprised. She sneered and said, Blood Demon King, you are really sinister and vicious. Ha ha ha, however, I'm afraid that Chu Tianqing's strength is even stronger than yours and mine. With Ghost Eye's strength, it will be very difficult to injure him, let alone kill him. The Blood Demon King grinned and sneered with a sinister expression. It's fine. This king is already prepared. Then, he stretched out his right hand and used his sharp nails to slowly cut open the right side of his abdomen. Suddenly, the flesh on the right side of his abdomen burst open and demon blood gushed out. Several dark purple demon bones were exposed in the long and narrow wound. Under the incredulous eyes of Granny Ghost and Ghost Eye, the Blood Demon King reached out and pulled out one of his ribs. The Blood Demon King held the bloody demon bone and said with a solemn expression, This is a reverse bone in this king's body. It has been nurtured for hundreds of years. Its power is not inferior to a top heaven origin grade divine weapon. As he spoke, he urged the surging bloodlight to wrap around the 1-foot-long reverse bone. In the blink of an eye, the reverse bone shrank rapidly and turned into a finger-long dark purple dagger. The Blood Demon King handed the dark purple dagger to Ghost Eye and said in a solemn tone, Ghost Eye, you just need to insert this reverse bone demon blade into Chu Tianqing's body and it will be a success. As long as you succeed, Chu Tianqing will be heavily injured even if he doesn't die. He will be eroded by this king's 100-year-old demon qi and won't be able to display any fighting strength. Ghost Eye took the reverse bone demon blade with a solemn expression and looked at the Blood Demon King with a burning gaze. He said in a deep voice, This subordinate will not disappoint Lord Blood Demon King. The Blood Demon King stretched out his hand to smooth out the wound on his right abdomen and said with a weak expression, There's no time to lose. Ghost Eye, begin immediately. Understood. Ghost Eye cupped his fists and quickly left the Devil Cave with the reverse bone demon blade, heaven-raising token, and star armor. After he left the Devil Cave, Granny Ghost asked in a low voice, Blood Demon King, there are many experts in the heaven-raising sect. Even if Ghost Eye can heavily injure Chu Tianqing, I'm afraid he won't be able to escape, right? The Blood Demon King glanced at her indifferently and said in a cold tone, So what? As long as this king's plan succeeds, it will be enough to cripple Chu Tianqing. Even if Ghost Eye sacrifices himself for this plan, it will be a worthy death and a loyal death. Granny Ghost and the High Priest frowned slightly. They felt a trace of fear towards the Blood Demon King's ruthless methods. The Blood Demon King would do anything to achieve his goal. The two of them couldn't help but worry that one day they would be sacrificed by the Blood Demon King. Inside the soul refining cauldron, Ji Tianqing was unconscious. His body was wrapped in blue flames and blood-red light. The serene blue flames caused his soul to endure extreme pain and cold torture. The blood-red light was refining his bloodline, causing the blood in his body to boil and almost burn. His soul was cold, but his body and bloodline were boiling hot. Such a situation where heat and cold intertwined made him suffer incomparable pain. However, his consciousness was still clear, and he could clearly feel the excruciating torture. Ji Tianqing was sure that this kind of torture was even more cruel than being cut into pieces. He also experienced how cruel and terrifying the demon race's methods of torturing people were. However, with great willpower, he gritted his teeth and persisted. No matter how his bloodline boiled, he would not relax, and would not allow the Kenshin bloodline to flow out of his body. As time passed, he gradually could not withstand the torture of the soul-refining cauldron, and his consciousness became more and more hazy. Unknowingly, his consciousness retreated into his soul. In the depths of his soul, a vast scene appeared. In the blue sky, there was a tall youth dressed in white robes walking in the sky. This person was handsome, his facial features firm and cold. His clear eyes contained a domineering aura that looked down on the world. He only wore a snow-white robe, black cloth shoes, and a silver belt around his waist. His long hair was tied up with a blue hair string. He was empty-handed, not carrying a sword or any talisman. However, he walked in the sky as though he was walking on flat ground, each step taking him 1,000 li. On the surface, this person's attire was extremely simple, ordinary and plain. But for some reason, he gave off a feeling of being high up in the sky, lying among the clouds and looking down on the world. Ji Tianqing focused his eyes and observed carefully. He saw some clues. The white robe that the youth wore was made from the ice and snow of the 9 heavens and 10 lands. The silver belt around his waist flickered with resplendent starlight, containing tens of thousands of stars. It was actually a long river of stars. Even the blue hairstring that tied his hair was actually a divine beast, the azure dragon. Although Ji Tianqing didn't understand why he was able to see through the young man's clothes, he didn't know what to do. But he faintly understood the identity of the youth, and almost blurted out the 2 words. Chapter 429. Originally, Ji Tianqing's consciousness was on the brink of annihilation. But when he saw that scene and saw Kenshin's figure, his consciousness became much clearer, as if he was supported by strength. His consciousness was completely immersed in the scene as he followed Kenshin's footsteps and looked at the vast world. He saw that under the blue sky, there was an endless dark green mountain range. At the foot of the mountain range, there was a large river meandering like a jade belt. What a magnificent scene of mountains and rivers! However, Ji Tianqing suddenly saw that in the sky ahead, there was a vast expanse of black clouds. The black clouds rolled and churned, covering the blue sky and the scorching sun, emitting a monstrous and cold demonic aura. The demonic aura enveloped a radius of 1,000 miles, causing dozens of mountain ranges to be plunged into darkness. Ji Tianqing looked at the mountain range and saw a 1,000-meter-tall black monster with a body as large as a mountain. It was wantonly destroying the mountains, destroying the world. The monster had 2 large heads, and its face was hideous and terrifying. Its wide mouth revealed fangs, and its scarlet eyes surged with murderous intent. Its appearance was like a giant ape, but it had 6 arms and 2 pairs of large black wings on its back. It dragged a black tail, like a dragon's tail. This monster was like a demon god that originated from ancient times. It had a hideous appearance and the power to destroy the world. Ji Tianqing looked at the peaks of the many mountain ranges and saw that there were many ancient palaces, houses, and buildings on the dozens of mountain ranges. There were also many martial artists in green and white robes fleeing in panic on the mountain range, letting out terrified and desperate cries. In front of the 4-winged demon, tens of thousands of martial artists were like tiny ants. Any struggle or resistance was futile. The tens of thousands of martial artists could not even escape and could only die in despair. The 4-winged demon casually shot out a ball of bloodlight, which could shatter a mountain and blast hundreds of thousands of martial artists into smithereens. Its gigantic feet stomped down fiercely, crushing the mountains one after another, turning them into yellow soil and ruins. Tens of thousands of ordinary martial artists were like a swarm of panicked ants as they were constantly trampled and killed by the 4-winged demon. After the martial artists died, their flesh and blood were corroded by the demonic aura, rotting into streams of dark red blood flow that gathered towards the 4-winged demon. The 4-winged demon absorbed countless streams of blood, and its power became more and more violent, shaking the world. Dozens of martial artists in gold or purple robes were flying high in the sky, using all kinds of martial arts that could split mountains and rivers to attack the 4-winged demon with all their might. However, the attacks of these divine prime martial artists could not hurt the 4-winged demon at all. The flames, the huge swords, and light blades that covered the sky and covered the demon's body could not even break through its protective demonic mist. On the other hand, it was the 4-winged devil's counterattack that caused the Heaven Prime experts to suffer heavy casualties. A casual slap from the 4-winged demon could smash a Heaven Prime expert into smithereens. In a short period of time, more than half of the divine prime martial artists were killed. Dozens of mountains were also destroyed, turning into broken ruins. At this moment, Ji Tianqing saw the white-robed young man walk through the air and arrive above the battlefield. The white-robed youth stood on a 1,000-mile demonic cloud, looking down at the 4-winged demon with a cold expression. He waved his hand and shot out a 10-mile-long sword light. Bang! The 4-winged demon that was massacring the martial artists suddenly had one of its wings cut off by the sword light. Its body staggered and fell to the ground. It immediately got up and looked up at the sky with a ferocious expression. When it saw the white-robed youth's appearance, its body shook. The scarlet demon's eyes were filled with intense shock and fear. "You are Kenshin." The white-robed youth's expression was stern. He ignored the four-winged demon's words and waved his hands again, shooting out two huge golden swords at the four-winged demon. The four-winged demon's body flashed and flew high into the sky. It turned into a black shadow that shot out cold light as it pounced at Kenshin. At that moment, Ji Tianqing clearly saw the white-robed youth forming a mysterious seal with a wave of his hand. In the sky behind the youth, four huge golden swords that were 1,000 meters tall appeared. Each of the huge swords was extremely sharp and contained a sword will that could tear the sky apart. Moreover, the four huge swords were surrounded by four huge phantoms that were as large as mountains. The first huge sword's phantom was a dark green divine dragon. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it glared at the demonic king. It emitted a sacred and majestic aura. Ji Tianqing recognized it immediately. It was the Eastern Green Dragon. The second huge sword's phantom was a white tiger that was as large as a mountain. It glared angrily and looked like it was about to pounce. It emitted a murderous aura that could destroy heaven and earth. It was the Western White Tiger. The third and fourth phantoms were a flaming divine bird that blotted out the sky and a divine beast formed by a turtle and snake. They were the Southern Vermilion Bird and the Northern Black Tortoise. The white-robed youth didn't need to use a sword. Instead, he used a supreme sword Dao secret technique to unleash the four golden sacred swords that contained the supreme might and destructive power of the four divine beasts. At that moment, he heard the youth's dignified roar. Slash! Instantly, the four golden sacred swords that could split heaven and earth flew across the sky like shooting stars toward the four-winged demon. The phantoms of the four divine beasts also enveloped the golden sacred swords as they descended from the sky toward the four-winged demon with destructive power. In an instant, the demonic clouds in the sky were illuminated by the four divine beasts. The four-winged demon's expression changed drastically. It channeled all its demonic power and roared as it unleashed its ultimate technique. It waved its 4 wings and 6 arms and unleashed a blood-red light and demonic mist that blotted out the sky to block the attack of the four divine beasts. Bam! 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 The sky within 1,000 miles immediately became extremely chaotic and turbid. Golden and blood-red light blotted out the sky. The white-robed youth stood high up in the sky and waved his sword fingers repeatedly as he controlled the four divine beasts to attack the four-winged demon. The phantoms of the four divine beasts continued to attack the demon amidst the demonic clouds and blood-red light, causing the sky to darken and the earth to dim as they fought with the demon. The earth-shattering battle lasted for a full 100 breaths. The four-winged demon was riddled with wounds and finally managed to shatter the four divine beasts. It looked up at the white-robed youth in the sky and sneered. Ha ha ha! The invincible Kenshin is only as... The white-robed youth looked at it with a cold expression and roared in a dignified voice. Sword, come! As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd fell silent. A golden light shot out from the sword fingers of his left hand and pointed toward the mountains and earth. The sword fingers of his right hand surged with a divine golden light as he pointed toward the distant sky. In the next instant, Ji Tianqing saw a huge gap appear in the dark sky. The gap quickly expanded in all directions and became a huge abyss with a radius of several hundred miles. The end of the abyss was connected to the heavens. Suddenly, a dazzling and divine golden light lit up in the dark abyss. The golden light descended from the heavens and passed through the endless abyss before descending upon this world in the blink of an eye. At this moment, Ji Tianqing could finally see that it was a gigantic sword that was over 100 miles in length. Chapter duplication was because the chapters that had been blocked yesterday were unblocked today. Thus, the system automatically sorted the chapters one by one. For those who could not read them normally, they could just clear the cache in the settings. Chapter 430. As the white-robed young man shouted coldly, the giant divine sword from the 9th heaven stabbed down and drowned the figure of the four-winged demon. The demon had no chance to dodge, let alone resist. Boom! With a deafening sound, the giant divine sword dispersed the demonic clouds in the sky. The body of the four-winged demon, which was over 1,000 meters tall, was smashed into pieces. Even the mountains and rivers down below had been blasted into a tens of thousands of meters deep abyss. The demon's body was destroyed, and only its demonic soul was left. It was suppressed under the abyss by the giant divine sword. Ji Tianqing witnessed this scene with his own eyes. The shock in his heart was indescribable. The four-winged demon was so powerful and ferocious. It killed hundreds of millions of people wantonly. It could kill a powerhouse of the Sky Origin stage with a flip of its palm. However, when the white-robed young man used the sword, The demon was killed on the spot by the giant divine sword. The young man's strength and means were really extraordinary. He was like a god in the ninth heaven. After a long time, until the scene gradually disappeared, Ji Tianqing was still immersed in the shock of the ninth heaven's sword. Soon, the scene in front of him changed. Above a blue lake, a white-robed young man was walking in the air. He was hurrying over 1,000 miles in one step. In the sky behind him, there was also a graceful figure, whose clothes were fluttering in the wind, flying at a high speed, closely following his footsteps. It was a beautiful girl with a bright temperament. She was about 18 or 19 years old. She was wearing a long silver dress with a white gauze on her shoulders. A pair of clear eyes were shining brightly. On her forehead, there was a silver crescent moon mark, which added a bit of holiness and mystery to her. In order to catch up with the white-robed young man, she seemed to have exhausted all her strength. Her pretty face was a little pale, and there were beads of sweat on her forehead. However, her eyes were still bright and excited. There was no slack or discouragement in her eyes. Finally, the young man stopped in the sky and turned around to look at her indifferently. Seeing this, the crescent moon girl's pretty face immediately revealed a deep joy, and she sped up to greet him. When she came closer, she looked at the white-robed young man with burning eyes and said in a gentle voice, "Humph, you ice-cold guy, don't you know how to take care of women at all?" There was not the slightest change in the young man's expression. His tone was indifferent as he said, "Mingyu, you disregarded the billions of people of the abandoned Moon Clan and chased me for millions of miles from the western mainland to this place. Is this what you want to say to me?" The girl called Mingyu wrinkled her cute little nose and said with a bright smile, This is the longest sentence you've said to me since I met you. Don't call me Mingyue. Just call me little you. Also, where are you going? Did old man Long of the Central State Imperial Court ask you to do something for him?" The white-robed young man looked at her expressionlessly and said indifferently, "As the holy maiden of the Moon Clan, how can you have such a girly temperament?" Mingyu's eyes shone even brighter. She smiled and said, "Are you concerned about me? Do you think that I'm not calm and dignified enough? Although I've never liked that since I was young, if you don't like it, I'll change." The young man frowned slightly and said indifferently, "Mingyu, we've only met by chance and don't have much to do with each other. You don't have to be like this. I won't accept it. Soon, I'll leave the profound sky continent. Why are you wasting time with me?" With that, the young man turned and flew away, leaving thousands of miles in one step. Mingyu hurriedly chased after him and shouted anxiously, "Hey! You're leaving the profound sky continent? Where are you going?" However, the white-robed young man's figure flickered and disappeared into the horizon after a few breaths. Mingyu chased for a long time but could not catch up. She could only stop with a dejected face. She looked in the direction where the white-robed young man left and pouted sullenly. She muttered in a firm tone, "Despicable guy, no matter where you're going, I'll find you." After a while, the image slowly disappeared. Ji Tianqing thought to himself, could she be the Mingyu Demon Empress? Basha did not lie to me. The relationship between the Mingyu Demon Empress and Kenshin is indeed one of love. That Mingyu Demon Empress is pure and simple. She's also a rare beauty. It's such a pity that she couldn't marry Kenshin. At this moment, his consciousness suddenly entered the sword god's tomb, and with a swoosh, he appeared under the indomitable sword steel. Why did I suddenly enter Kenshin's tomb? Could it be that the burial of heaven pulled my consciousness in? Ji Tianqing looked up at the heavenly sword steel in confusion and shouted with his mind, "Senior burial of heaven, is that you?" The ancient and distant voice of the burial of heaven immediately came from the heavenly sword steel. "That's right, I let you in." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "I saw some strange images just now. It seems to be something that happened to Kenshin when he was alive." The burial of heaven said solemnly, "Those are Kenshin's memories." Ji Tianqing was somewhat puzzled. "Why do I have Kenshin's memories?" The burial of heaven was silent for a moment, then said, "Perhaps it has something to do with the Kenshin bloodline you have fused with." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked, "Don't tell me you don't know what's going on." The burial of heaven said calmly, "Ever since Kenshin fell, I fell into a deep slumber. There are many things that I don't know." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and continued, "Besides Kenshin's memories, there are many more images of Kenshin's cultivation in the depths of my soul. Kenshin's cultivation methods and those miraculous martial arts are all imprinted in my soul memories. The Burial of Heaven said solemnly, "You have Kenshin's memories. This is a great opportunity. You can try to cultivate Kenshin's other ultimate arts. Maybe you will gain something." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. Then, his consciousness left the Kenshin tomb and returned to his body. His body and soul were still enduring the refinement of the blue soul fire and blood flames. His soul was cold and still, but his body and bloodline were boiling hot. The hot blood in his chest was about to burst out of his body. But Ji Tianxing gritted his teeth and endured the pain and torture. He used his consciousness to control the power of the Kenshin bloodline and circulate it in his body. Immediately, the Kenshin bloodline burst out with vast divine power and filled his limbs and bones. The sword embryo and sword vein also produced vast amounts of vital energy that allowed him to quickly recover his strength. He endured the pain with great willpower and sat in the soul-refining cauldron. He started to comprehend the Kenshin's ultimate arts in his soul. Countless profound and wondrous ultimate arts flashed through his mind. Chapter 431. Ji Tianxing's consciousness was completely immersed in the Rising Dragon technique. This technique was not a sword technique, but it was inextricably linked to it. The scene that appeared in his mind clearly showed the scene when Kenshin cultivated the Rising Dragon technique. In the past, Kenshin had encountered countless dangers in the process of becoming an unparalleled expert, and even fell into certain death situations several times. But in the end, Kenshin found a way to escape from the desperate situation, and was able to kill his enemy. As for the sword god's various methods of escaping, they formed the supreme art Rising Dragon. Ji Tianxing was fully focused on comprehending the Rising Dragon technique, completely forgetting the passage of time and the pain and suffering he was enduring. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. The power of Kenshin's bloodline had already recovered 30% of his power. As his power gradually recovered, the Kenshin battle robe hidden in his body finally reappeared. Swoosh! Kenshin's battle robe flashed with a sacred golden light, and under his control, it turned into a pair of wide golden wings. Ji Tianxing controlled the golden wings to block in front of him, using the wings to cover his body and protect himself. Instantly, the golden wings blocked most of the power of the blue soul fire and dark red blood flames. The pain and suffering he was enduring was also greatly reduced. Not long after, Ji Tianxing finally comprehended the essence of the Rising Dragon technique. Cultivating the Rising Dragon technique allowed one to borrow all external forces and turn them into one's own to break through the predicament. At this moment, he was trapped in the soul-refining cauldron, and he was weak and powerless. There was no way he could break through the seal and escape the soul-refining cauldron. However, after he comprehended the Rising Dragon technique, he found a way to escape. He focused on cultivating the Rising Dragon technique, and tried to refine the blue soul fire and dark red blood flames. These two flames were the power of the soul-refining cauldron and the burning soul and blood dissipation array, and were originally used to torture and refine him. Under normal circumstances, he could only desperately resist these two flames to prevent his body and soul from being refined. But after he cultivated the Rising Dragon technique, he could do the opposite and refine these two flames for his own use. Soon, Ji Tianxing used the Rising Dragon technique to refine a ball of blue soul fire and blood flames. The blue soul fire and dark red blood flames mixed together, forming wisps of air mixed with red and blue, and entered his body. His power was suddenly increased, and his power recovered faster. The Rising Dragon technique is amazing. It can actually refine Granny Gui's soul fire and Blood Demon King's blood flames. After I completely master this technique, I can refine the soul fire and blood demonic cauldron's soul and recover my power. Ji Tianxing thought to himself. He was shocked by the miraculous effect of the Rising Dragon. As time went by, his understanding of the Rising Dragon technique became deeper and deeper. As he refined more and more soul fire and blood red flames, his power was quickly recovering. Another 6 hours had passed, and his power had actually completely recovered. At this time, soul and blood the cauldron him. Ji Tianxing's spirit was greatly shaken, and his heart was filled with anticipation. He continued to cultivate the Rising Dragon technique and refine the soul fire and blood flames within the cauldron to strengthen his power. Along with the strands of red and blue airflow entering his body, his strength ceaselessly increased. Half a day later, when the soul fire and blood flames he refined had reached the limit, he borrowed the energy of these two flames to open up another 2 meridians. In this way, he possessed 16 meridians. When he used the soul fire and blood flames to temper the two newly opened meridians into sword veins, he naturally attained the 5th level of the origin core stage. After advancing to the 5th level of the origin core stage, his strength had doubled, and his condition had reached its peak. Only half of the soul fire and blood flames within the soul refining cauldron remained, and they still surged with terrifying might. Ji Tianqing continued to cultivate, using the rising dragon technique to refine the soul fire and blood flames and condense them into a ball of light mixed with red and blue. A day later, when he completely refined the soul fire and blood flames within the cauldron, a fist-sized red and blue ball of light appeared before him. Within the ball of light, the dark blue soul fire and dark red blood flames were compressed to the limit, and they contained a might that could destroy the heavens and the earth. The soul refining cauldron became dim and lightless, and its strength was extremely weak. Ji Tianqing opened his eyes and carefully observed the situation within the cauldron. This soul refining cauldron was a heaven origin grade treasure, and only with a formidable heaven origin formation could it exert a formidable might. Ji Tianqing understood that if he wanted to escape from the soul refining cauldron, then he had to break the formation within the cauldron. Fortunately, his attainments in the formation Dao had reached the Grandmaster stage, and he knew the various heaven origin formations like the back of his hand. He only used 2 hours to see through the formation within the soul refining cauldron and found the method to break it. After that, he executed his formation Dao ultimate technique and struck out with his palm to start breaking the formation within the cauldron. In the dark stone chamber, the high priest sat in the corner with his eyes closed, cultivating silently. Granny Ghost said that it would take about 2 days to extract Ji Tianqing's Kenshin bloodline using the soul refining cauldron. She and the Blood Demon King had to go out to do something, so the high priest stayed in the stone chamber to watch over the soul refining cauldron. Originally, the soul refining cauldron was activated, and the soul refining cauldron was surrounded by dark red blood flames and dark blue soul fire. The stone chamber was filled with dark red bloodlight and surging with a strong demonic aura. At this time, the high priest noticed that the dark red bloodlight in the stone chamber was getting dimmer and dimmer, and the demonic aura was gradually weakening. He subconsciously ended his cultivation and opened his eyes in confusion. When he saw that the soul fire and blood flames on the soul refining cauldron had disappeared, he immediately widened his eyes and revealed a puzzled expression. Swoosh! The high priest stood up and quickly walked to the side of the soul refining cauldron, frowning in confusion. Strange. Why did the soul fire and blood flames on the soul refining cauldron suddenly extinguish? Lord Demon King and Granny Ghost have already gone out to hunt for flesh and blood to replenish their power. Lord Demon King ordered me to watch over the soul refining cauldron, so it's best that nothing goes wrong at this time, the high priest muttered silently, his eyes and expression a little solemn. He vaguely felt that something might have happened to the soul refining cauldron. However, the soul refining cauldron was Granny Ghost's treasure. Granny Ghost was fully in charge of extracting the Kenshin bloodline. Even though he was puzzled and worried, he did not dare to open the soul refining cauldron to check the situation inside. He could only pray silently in his heart that nothing would go wrong, and that Lord Demon King and Granny Ghost would return soon. However, at this time, the soul refining cauldron suddenly emitted a clanged sound, breaking the silence of the stone chamber. The high priest's body suddenly shook, and he frowned as he looked at the lid of the soul refining cauldron. He saw that the thick and simple lid of the cauldron had actually opened a crack. This is bad. The soul refining cauldron has been opened. The high priest's expression changed, and he immediately realized that something was wrong. Chapter 432. Just as the high priest was about to check on the soul refining cauldron, he saw a golden light shoot out of the cauldron and the lid fly off. His expression changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with anger and anxiety. Damn it! How could this be? He never expected that something would happen to the soul refining cauldron at this moment. In a moment of desperation, he stretched out his wide palms and shot out a dark red light towards the cauldron lid. At this moment, a golden light flew out of the soul refining cauldron. There was a figure in the golden light. It was a young man in a white robe with a pair of golden wings. It was Ji Tianqing. He had just rushed out of the soul refining cauldron when he saw the high priest grabbing the cauldron lid with both hands and staring at him in shock. Without hesitation, he waved his palms and released a huge flaming sword radiance towards the high priest. Crimson Dragon Flash. The flaming sword radiance exuded a terrifying and violent power. It lit up the entire stone room with a dazzling light. The high priest came back to his senses and hurriedly held up the cauldron lid as a shield in front of him. The crimson dragon flash hit the cauldron lid with a deafening sound. Bam! The lid of the cauldron was sent flying and smashed into the rock wall, creating a huge crater and numerous cracks on the wall. The crimson dragon flash was also destroyed by the impact and exploded into a sky full of bloody shards that scattered in all directions. The high priest took the opportunity to counterattack. He waved his palms and shot out dozens of bloody palm shadows that covered half of the stone room towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing did not want to fight, nor did he want to tangle with the high priest. He was wrapped in a dazzling golden light as he broke through the thick stone door with great strength and entered the cave. Tens of blood-red palm silhouettes slapped on the wall and the door of the stone room, causing a series of loud bangs. A few huge handprints were left on the wall and the stone door was smashed into pieces. Seeing Ji Tianqing escape from the stone room, the high priest chased after him without hesitation and roared with killing intent. Ji Tianqing, you little bastard, don't even think about escaping. Ji Tianqing spread out his spiritual consciousness and immediately probed the situation inside the cave. The cave was dark and gloomy, filled with gloomy ghost qi and demonic fog, but Granny Ghost and Blood Demon King were not in the cave. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing secretly heaved a sigh of relief and fled towards the entrance of the cave as fast as lightning. Shwa! He flapped his golden wings and turned into a golden streak of light. He passed through the cave as fast as lightning and rushed to the cave entrance in the blink of an eye. The entrance of the cave was sealed by an array, and there was a layer of light red light screen. Before he could study the array at the entrance of the cave, the high priest chased after him. Green lightning devil palm. The high priest roared in anger and used a demonic art. He waved his palm, creating a sky full of bloody palm shadows that rushed over like rolling thunder. Ji Tianqing could only use the flying star sword technique to counterattack. Water split. He used 100% of his strength to release a 10-meter-long enormous golden sword that fiercely slashed towards the high priest. The enormous sword collided with the bloody palm shadows that covered the sky, exploding out with a muffled rumbling sound that reverberated endlessly within the cave. Both of them were unable to gain the upper hand and were both forced back a few steps. Ji Tianqing didn't know the whereabouts of Granny Ghost and Blood Demon King, so he wasn't willing to get entangled with the high priest to avoid delaying time. Although he just advanced to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage and his strength had doubled explosively. But if he were to go against Granny Ghost and Blood Demon King, he would absolutely have no possibility of escaping and would be captured again. When the high priest launched another attack, in order to end the battle quickly, he didn't hesitate to withdraw a fist-sized ball of flame and used all his strength to blast it towards the high priest. Go to hell, bastard. That ball of flame that was condensed to the extreme contained 3 types of flames. Not only was there a dark blue soul fire, there was also a dark red blood flame, and a crimson red crimson true fire. This 3-colored ball of flame was precisely Ji Tianqing's soul fire and blood flame that he'd refined earlier, plus his crimson true fire. The ball of flame instantly blasted onto the high priest, exploding out with a muffled bang. Instantly, the high priest's protective bloody light shattered, and his entire body flew out, fiercely smashing onto the hard rock wall. A human-shaped dent was smashed out of the rock wall, and dense cracks split open. That ball of flame also erupted with a might that could destroy the heavens and the earth, gushing out with boundless 3-colored flames. The dark blue soul fire, the dark red blood flame, and the crimson red crimson true fire instantly filled the entire cave. The terrifying might that was like the full-force strike of a Sky Origin stage powerhouse instantly exploded out within the cave. Bang! The 3,000-meter-tall mountain was shaken to the point of ceaselessly trembling, on the verge of collapse, and countless ravines split open. The terrifying might of the 3-colored flames fiercely bombarded the formation at the entrance of the cave, instantly shattering that layer of bloody light barrier. The high priest was also engulfed by the destructive power. He immediately opened his mouth, spitting out a mouthful of blood, and fell into the rubble with severe injuries. Immediately after, his body was swallowed by the 3-colored flames, and his black robe and purple hair were burning up. The extremely cold dark blue soul fire invaded his head and soul, causing his consciousness to blur, and his soul to gradually disappear. The dark red blood flame and the crimson true fire burned his flesh and blood, turning him into charcoal. Enduring the heart-wrenching pain, he let out shrill cries and wails, struggling and rolling on the rubble. Ji Tianqing wrapped his golden wings around his body, blocking the power of the 3-colored flames, and was not injured. He glanced at the high priest in the sea of fire, and saw that the high priest's flesh and blood and soul were burning up. Obviously, he was not going to survive. You brought this upon yourself, you can't live. Ji Tianqing shouted in a cold voice, and without hesitation, he turned around and rushed out of the cave, escaping from the cave. Swoosh! He flapped his golden wings and flew out of the cave at lightning speed, arriving in the sky above a forest. Turning his head to look back at the cave, he saw that the 1,000-meter-tall mountain was still shaking. Several huge ravines had appeared on the mountain, and countless earth and boulders had collapsed on the mountain peak. 3 colored flames kept spewing out of the distorted hole, burning the forest around the hole to ashes. I have to leave this place as soon as possible. If the Blood Demon King and Granny Ghost come back, I'll be dead for sure. Ji Tianqing muttered in his heart, and hurriedly flapped his golden wings, flying into the distance. His figure turned into a golden stream of light, and quickly disappeared into the horizon. It was evening, and the sun was setting in the west. Ji Tianqing's back was facing the setting sun, and he flew east as fast as lightning, rushing back in the direction of the Sky Pillar sect. While flying, he had the time to check his situation. Only now did he realize that his interspatial ring was gone, and so was his star armor. Fortunately, the inconspicuous 100 treasures brocade pouch was still hanging on his waist and had not been taken away. He checked it with his spirit sense, and saw that Qian Yu and the Black Dragon Sword were still in the pouch. However, Qian Yu and the Black Dragon Sword were unable to withstand the refining of the soul refining cauldron, and had been seriously injured and unconscious. Ji Tianqing used his spirit sense to call them several times, but he was unable to wake them up. Chapter 433. Inside the Sky Pillar sect, at the top of the Red Cloud Peak, a handsome young man in a white robe walked through the square expressionlessly toward the Sky Pillar Palace. This person's figure and appearance were no different from Ji Tianqing. Even his expression and temperament were exactly the same. Obviously, he was Gui Tong, who had sneaked into the Sky Pillar sect. He had used the demonic Shadow 100 transformations to change into Ji Tianqing's appearance. He was also holding the Sky Pillar token and wearing the star armor. Of course, he could pass off as the real one. Soon, Gui Tong entered the palace and arrived outside a secret room. The black-robed guard guarding the door of the secret room was very familiar with him, and his cold eyes softened. Gui Tong looked at the black-robed guard and said expressionlessly, "I have something to report to Master." The black-robed guard nodded and cast a spell to open the secret room's defensive formation and opened the door. Gui Tong walked into the secret room with an indifferent expression, and saw a burly middle-aged man with a dignified aura sitting in the dimly lit room. This person was the sect master, Chu Tianxing. He sat on a large jade chair with a black turtle shell on the stone table in front of him. The tortoise shell shone with a lustrous brilliance, revealing countless specks of starlight and silver lines, emitting a mysterious and simple aura. Chu Tianxing was casting a spell to control the light spots and silver lines on the turtle shell, as if he was deducing some heavenly secret. A cold light flashed in Gui Tong's eyes, but he immediately suppressed it. He stepped in front of Chu Tianxing, cupped his hands and said respectfully, "Disciple greets sect master. No need for formalities." Chu Tianxing nodded slightly and waved his hand to send out a silver light to put away the black turtle shell. He looked up at Gui Tong with a gratified expression and said softly, "Tianxing, did your trip to the Beast King Valley go smoothly?" Gui Tong nodded calmly. Everything went smoothly. There were no twists and turns. That's good. Chu Tianxing was originally a little worried, but now that he saw that Ji Tianxing was safe, he was completely relieved. He frowned and thought for a moment before continuing to ask, "Tianxing, after you gave the item to the Beast King, what did he say?" Hearing this, Ghost Eye's eyes flickered with excitement. He was stunned for a moment before he nodded and said, "Senior Beast King instructed me to pass on a message to Master. This message is very confidential." "Oh, what news?" Chu Tianxing raised his eyebrows, revealing a look of anticipation. Ghost Eye walked to his side, bent down and whispered into his ear, "Senior Beast King asked this disciple to tell you. Your death has come." When Gui Tong said the first half of his sentence, his right hand had already reached behind Chu Tianxing's back. A small purple blade appeared in his palm. It was the reverse bone devil blade. As he spoke the second half of his sentence, his right hand erupted with the strength of his entire life as he ruthlessly slapped Chu Tian's back. Boom! With a muffled sound, the reversed bone devil blade pierced into Chu Tianxing's body. Caught off guard, Chu Tian was not prepared for Ji Tianxing's sneak attack. He didn't even have time to cast a true Yuan shield. Ghost Eye's palm strike, which had been prepared for a long time, immediately sent him tumbling to the ground. The moment the reverse bone devil blade pierced into his body, it immediately erupted with a torrent of demonic chi, instantly damaging his internal organs and corroding his meridians. Piff! Chu Tianxing spat out a mouthful of blood, his face as pale as paper. He endured the heart-wrenching pain and turned his head to look at Ghost Eye. He angrily shouted, "You're not Tianxing. You're a demon spawn." The reverse bone devil blade's sinister cold chi and turbulent demonic chi made him instantly understand everything. The Ji Tianxing in front of him was definitely a fake. He was definitely a demon spawn in disguise. Ghost Eye's plan had succeeded, and his scheme had succeeded. There was no longer any need to hide. He revealed a sinister expression and said with a cold sneer, "Haha, Chu Tianxing, going against my clan will not end well. Go to hell." As soon as he finished speaking, Ghost Eye raised his right palm and struck out a dark red light towards Chu Tianxing. Although Chu Tianxing was heavily injured, his internal organs and meridians having been torn apart by the reverse bone devil blade, his cultivation had plummeted. But he was still a divine prime expert. He gritted his teeth and endured his injuries, raised his hand, and struck out at Ghost Eye. Bam! The two palms collided, and a loud sound exploded, reverberating fiercely in the secret room. A violent burst of energy burst out, instantly shattering the tables and chairs in the secret room. The powerful force knocked Chu Tianxing back 3 meters, his back slamming into the wall of the secret room. Ghost Eye, on the other hand, was sent flying backward and smashed hard against the door of the secret room, causing a muffled thud. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. The Atlas medallion hanging on his waist also fell to the ground. But he immediately got up, waved his sleeve to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth, and pounced on Chu Tianxing again. At this moment, the secret room's stone door suddenly opened. The black-robed guard outside the secret room was alarmed by the commotion and rushed in like lightning. When he saw the situation in the room, he unsheathed his sword and slashed at Ghost Eye without hesitation. "How dare you assassinate the sect master?" Dang! Ghost Eye's figure flashed, dodging the black-robed guard's sword, and immediately rushed out of the secret room, fleeing. The black-robed guard hurriedly rushed to Chu Tianxing's side, anxiously asking, "Sect master, how are your injuries?" Chu Tianxing circulated his cultivation to resist the reverse bone devil blade's corrosion, and shouted in a low voice, "Don't worry about me, quickly chase after him. Don't let that demon escape." "Understood," the black-robed guard shouted, and immediately rushed out of the secret room with his sword, chasing after Ghost Eye. Soon, the black-robed guards of the Atlas Palace were alerted, and immediately sent out emergency signal arrows. The 2 elders living on the Crimson Firmament Peak heard the news, and together with the black-robed guards, they joined forces to kill the fleeing Ghost Eye. Inside the secret room, Chu Tianxing sat cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed, circulating his cultivation to suppress the demonic energy in his body. The reverse bone devil blade was like a demonic dragon, wreaking havoc in his body, crazily destroying his internal organs, meridians, limbs, and bones. His entire body surged with jet-black demonic energy, flickering with intense flames. His face alternated between pitch-black and golden. Not long after, Xiang Wuji and Yun Yao rushed into the secret room with hurried expressions. Yun Yao had just finished recuperating and cultivating last night. When she heard that the Atlas Palace was in chaos, she hurried over to check on the situation. Xiang Wuji was watering the flowers in the Great Peace Palace. When he saw the emergency signal arrow, he knew that something big had happened, and hurriedly rushed to the Atlas Palace. Seeing Chu Tianxing's back covered in blood and surrounded by demonic energy, Xiang Wuji anxiously asked, "Chu Tianxing, what's going on? Who injured you?" Chu Tianxing said in a low voice, "The remnants of the demon race disguised themselves as Tianxing and assassinated me when I wasn't paying attention." Hearing this, Xiang Wuji was so angry that his face turned ashen, and his eyes surged with killing intent. That damned demon worm, how dare he be so arrogant? This old man will wring his neck. After shouting angrily, he quickly left the secret room and chased after Ghost Eye. At this time, Chu Tianxing saw a token on the ground. It was the Atlas medallion he had given to Ji Tianxing. When he was fighting with Ghost Eye just now, this medallion had fallen from Ghost Eye's body. Chu Tianxing suddenly thought of something, and hurriedly said to Yun Yao, Tianqing's Atlas Medallion and Star Armor have fallen into the hands of the remnants of the demon race. Not good. Tianqing must have met with misfortune and fallen into the hands of the demons. Chapter 434. Night fell, and the dark night sky was dotted with stars. A bright moon hung high in the sky, sprinkling down millions of miles of flawless moonlight. Tianqing flapped his golden wings and sped through the night sky. His expression was somewhat gloomy, and his heart was filled with worry. He had been flying for 4 hours now, but the little black dragon and Qian Yu had not woken up. Their injuries were clearly not light. It did not matter if he lost his interspatial ring and starry armor. Those were mere worldly possessions that he did not care about. However, if anything happened to Qian Yu and the little black dragon, his losses would be too great. He looked indifferently at the night sky in front of him and secretly increased his flying speed. An hour later, he suddenly saw a majestic mountain more than 3,000 meters tall in front of him. He could vaguely make out a huge pagoda standing on the mountain peak under the hazy moonlight. That towering mountain peak and the 1,000-meter-tall pagoda on top of it seemed somewhat familiar to him. He frowned and thought for a moment, then suddenly remembered. That was the Seven Stars Pagoda. Tianqing looked up at the Seven Stars Pagoda on the mountain peak and saw a bright full moon hanging in the night sky behind the pagoda. For some reason, that moon was exceptionally large, exuding a bright silver moonlight that enveloped the entire Seven Stars Pagoda. The Seven Stars Pagoda bathed in the moonlight, and the top of the pagoda flickered with a dazzling silver light, appearing extremely mysterious. Tianqing thought of Xueqi, who was still sleeping at the top of the pagoda and could not help but fly toward that mountain peak. He quickly arrived at the top of the mountain and stood on the flat ground below the pagoda. The Seven Stars Pagoda under the night sky was quiet and serene. Only the night wind whistled through the empty mountain peak, making it seem very bleak and lonely. Tianqing stood at the bottom of the pagoda in a daze for a long time, looking up at the top of the pagoda. Xueqi's figure appeared in his mind. He thought of her pure and cute smile, and recalled every little thing that had happened since they met. Scenes of the past flashed through his mind, evoking his memories. He was immersed in his memories, quietly standing at the bottom of the pagoda, allowing the night wind to blow at his robes and hair. After a long time, he finally woke up from his memories and restrained his thoughts. He looked up at the top of the pagoda and said to himself, now that the Tianjin sect is eyeing us covetously, and the demon race is ready to make a move, our sect is in a very dangerous situation. You can sleep peacefully in this seven-star pagoda. Rest well and refine your Crimson Star bloodline. Don't worry. Once the sect's crisis is resolved, I will come and take you back. Although Tianqing's voice was not loud, it contained a sense of firmness that spread through the night sky. At the peak of the Seven Stars Pagoda, the spirit soul crystal in the middle of the Seven Stars array was flickering with dazzling starlight, releasing boundless stellar energy. A palm-sized jade soul coffin was lying quietly on the spirit soul crystal. The exquisite and mysterious jade soul coffin was enveloped by a layer of silver moonlight, exuding a mysterious and cold aura. Xueqi, dressed in a green robe, lay peacefully in the coffin, as if he was sleeping. Her delicate cheeks faintly revealed a trace of redness, making her complexion look quite good. The hazy and bright moonlight enveloped her body, moving slowly like flowing water, constantly injecting pure stellar energy into her body. On her fair and smooth forehead, there was a silver crescent moon mark that flickered from time to time with her slow breathing. This silver crescent moon mark made her temperament mysterious and holy, as tranquil and flawless as the bright moon in the night sky. At this moment, Tianqing was talking to himself under the pagoda, saying those words with a firm tone. Xueqi, who was sleeping in the jade soul coffin, seemed to have sensed something and slowly opened her eyes. When she opened her eyes, the silver crescent moon mark on her forehead immediately disappeared. Xueqi looked up at the translucent jade soul coffin lid and saw the dark starry sky, as well as the densely packed stars. A trace of confusion and doubt flashed through her big clear eyes. Big brother Tianqing. Her lips moved slightly as she let out a murmur filled with longing. She frowned and slowly sat up, reaching out to try to open the jade soul coffin lid. Suddenly, the Seven Stars array lit up with dazzling starlight, bursting with a powerful and mysterious force, instantly destroying the array that Tianqing had set up to protect the jade soul coffin. Then, an invisible and majestic force enveloped the jade soul coffin and flew towards the sea of clouds at the edge of the Seven Stars platform. Swoosh! The jade soul coffin was ejected out of the Seven Stars Pagoda by the Seven Stars array, passing through the sea of clouds and turning into a hazy ray of moonlight, falling towards the peak of the mountain below the pagoda. As the jade soul coffin kept falling, the size of the jade soul coffin also increased rapidly. Xueqi was still trapped in the jade soul coffin, not knowing her situation and unable to leave the jade soul coffin. Ji Tianqing muttered a few words to himself and was about to withdraw his gaze from the pagoda, preparing to leave. But at this moment, he suddenly saw a silver brilliance at the peak of the 7 Stars Pagoda. That silver light streaked across the night sky like a meteor, falling rapidly towards the pagoda. What's that? Ji Tianqing frowned, a touch of doubt flashing in his eyes. He stared at the silver light that was getting brighter and brighter, carefully observing it for a while. Suddenly, a thought flashed in his mind, vaguely guessing something. He immediately flapped his golden wings, flew into the dark night sky, and flew towards the silver light. After 2 breaths, when he arrived near the silver light, he saw clearly that the silver light was enveloping a jade coffin. Sure enough, as he had guessed, the jade soul coffin in the silver light was the jade soul coffin that he had placed at the top of the pagoda. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to meet it. He activated his majestic true core strength, condensing it into 2 giant golden palms, and hugged the jade soul coffin that was falling rapidly. The falling speed of the jade soul coffin immediately slowed down, and the impact gradually dissipated. After a while, Ji Tianqing hugged the jade soul coffin and landed steadily on the ground below the pagoda. I clearly placed the jade soul coffin in the 7 stars array. How could it suddenly be ejected by the 7 stars pagoda? After landing, Ji Tianqing laid the jade soul coffin flat on the ground and quickly checked the condition of the jade soul coffin. Fortunately, the jade soul coffin was intact, and Xueqi was still in the jade soul coffin, unharmed. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief. However, he saw that Xueqi had woken up in the coffin, and was staring at him with her big eyes, her beautiful face full of excitement. Xueqi has woken up? That's great! Ji Tianqing was also delighted, and he quickly cast a spell to open the jade soul coffin. Xueqi immediately jumped out of the coffin, opened her arms, and threw herself into his arms. Brother Tianqing, I finally found you. Boo-hoo. Brother Tianqing, don't leave me behind in the future, okay? Xueqi hugged him tightly, as if she was afraid that he would run away. With tears on her face, she told him how much she missed him and felt wronged. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a ray of light to put away the jade soul coffin. He stretched out his arms to hug Xueqi, patted her back gently, and said in a gentle voice, Xueqi, it's good that you're okay. Don't cry. I won't leave you alone. Xueqi smiled through her tears and nodded repeatedly. Well, I knew it. Dreams are the opposite. How could Brother Tianqing leave me alone and ignore me? Ji Tianqing stretched out his hand to wipe away the tears on her beautiful face and the corner of her eyes. He asked in confusion, Dream? Xueqi, what dream did you have? Xueqi's beautiful face suddenly blushed. She secretly glanced at Ji Tianqing and whispered, I had a very long dream. There were too many things in the dream, and I can't remember some of them clearly. However, I was dreaming just now. The 2 of us were flying in the sky. You were flying in front, and I was chasing after you. I kept shouting for you to stop and wait for me, but you were cold to me. You flew faster and faster, and further away. Later, I couldn't find you. Brothers, where are the recommendation tickets? Chapter 435. Ji Tianqing vaguely felt a sense of déjà vu as he listened to her talk about the dream. But he didn't think too much about it. He reached out and pinched Xueqi's little face and said with a smile, Silly girl, how can I be so cold to you? It's just your dream. He comforted Xueqi and then asked about the matter with concern. How are you feeling now, Ke? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Xueqi frowned and thought for a while before shaking her head. I don't feel uncomfortable anywhere. She turned her head to look at the 7 stars pagoda behind her and then looked at the dark night sky around her. She then asked with a puzzled expression, Big Brother Tianqing, where are we? Why are we in this desolate place? Ji Tianqing patiently explained, This is the 7 stars pagoda, the place where you went into seclusion to recuperate. I just came back from a faraway place and passed by here. I thought that you were sleeping here, so I came to see you. I didn't expect that you would end your cultivation and be ejected from the 7 stars pagoda. Xueqi was confused. She blinked her big eyes and asked, Big Brother Tianqing, Have I been sleeping for a long time? Can you tell me what happened after I fainted? Okay. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. But let's talk on the way. After saying that, Ji Tianqing flapped his golden wings and flew into the dark night sky with Ji Ku, returning to the Sky Pillar sect as fast as lightning. On the way back to the Sky Pillar sect, Ji Tianqing told Ji Ku the whole story. Only then did Ji Ku understand that the reason why she fainted for no reason was because she had awakened the Red Star bloodline, and there was a mysterious power hidden in her body. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing borrowed the Jade Soul Coffin and climbed up the Seven Stars Pagoda, placing her in the Seven Stars Array and allowing her to survive this tribulation. The time inside the Seven Stars Pagoda was different from the outside world. 2 months had passed in the outside world, but she had been sleeping in the Seven Star Pagoda for 2.5 years. Under Ji Tianqing's reminder, she silently circulated her energy to check her body's condition, only to discover that her Red Star bloodline had been completely activated. The mysterious power in her body was still there. It was still violent, powerful, and unfathomable. Moreover, her cultivation base had improved by leaps and bounds. She had actually reached level 8 of the Tongxian stage. In such a short period of time, her strength had increased tremendously from the 7th level of the True Energy stage to the 8th level of the Tongxian stage. This was equivalent to her only using 2 months to grow from an ordinary outer court disciple to an elite disciple of the Sky Pillar sect. Ji Tianqing flew for a couple of hours and covered another 1,000 miles. It was early in the morning, and he and Ji Ku were still about 800 kilometers away from the Sky Pillar sect. Suddenly, Ji Tianqing saw a white figure appear in the sky in front of him, flying over at lightning speed. When he got closer, he saw that the huge white figure was actually a snow-white spirit crane. Moreover, the appearance of the spirit beast white crane was very familiar to him. Could it be eldest senior sister's mount? This thought appeared in Ji Tianqing's mind, and he sped up towards the spirit crane. After a while, the distance between him and the spirit crane shortened to a few kilometers. At this moment, he finally saw clearly that there was indeed a beautiful woman in white standing on the spirit crane's back. It was Yun Yao. When he saw Yun Yao had already seen him. Seeing that he was safe and sound, Yun Yao finally felt relieved. She hurriedly stopped the spirit crane in the air. Ji Tianqing flew onto the spirit crane's back with Ji Ku and came to Yun Yao's side. Yun Yao stared at Ji Tianqing and carefully sized him up. When she saw that he was not injured, the worry in her eyes gradually dissipated. "Junior brother Tianqing, I've finally found you," Ji Tianqing asked in confusion. "Eldest senior sister, you came here specially to find me? What happened?" Yun Yao glanced at Ji Ku and rode the spirit crane back to the Sky Pillar sect. "Let's talk as we walk. Junior brother Tianqing, last night, a remnant of the demon clan disguised as you. Holding your sky-raising token and wearing your star armor, he snuck into the red firmament peak to assassinate sect master." Suddenly hearing this news, Ji Tianqing's expression changed. "What? A demon actually disguised as me and tried to assassinate sect master?" His face was full of shock and anger, and a cold murderous intent flashed in his eyes. "No wonder I lost my space ring and star armor. So that's why. Damn demons, they're really despicable and sinister to the extreme." Ji Tianqing cursed in a low voice and hurriedly asked Yun Yao, "Eldest senior sister, is master injured?" Yun Yao said with a solemn expression, "That demon remnant had planned it long ago, but master was caught off guard and the demon got away with it." Ji Tianqing's mood became heavier and heavier, and he asked, "How are master's injuries?" Yun Yao said in a low voice, "Master's injuries are very serious, but he also saw through the demon's identity and had the elders hunt him down. That demon remnant couldn't escape and was caught on the spot by the Grand Elder. He was slashed 49 times before being executed. Master realized that you were in danger and was worried that you would fall into the hands of the demons, so he sent me, the elders, and the deacons to look for you." After a pause, she said with a solemn expression, "Junior brother Tianqing, let's hurry back to the sect as soon as possible. You must see master. Master is seriously injured, but he refuses to go into seclusion to heal. He insists on waiting in the secret room for you to return. He has something to tell you face to face." Seeing Yun Yao's solemn expression, Ji Tianqing had a bad premonition in his heart. He clenched his fists and looked at the sky in front of him with a frown. Although there was a rising sun in the sky was filled with multicolored light. His heart was shrouded in a layer of haze, and the sky seemed to be obscured by the demon aura, making it very dark. He could guess that his master, Chu Tianqing, was assassinated by the demons and was seriously injured. This would definitely make the demons' actions more rampant. Next, the Sky Pillar sect situation would become more and more dangerous. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. The spirit crane carried Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku back to the Sky Pillar sect and landed on the Crimson Firmament Peak. Yun Yao brought the spirit crane back to the White Cloud Hall, while Ji Ku returned to the Spirit Medicine Hall to report to the Spirit Medicine Elder that they were safe. Ji Tianqing walked to the Sky Pillar Hall alone and rushed to Chu Tianqing's secret room with a solemn expression. When he arrived at the door of the secret room, the black-robed guard hurriedly opened the door and said in a low voice, "Tianqing, the sect master has been waiting for you for a long time. Quickly go in." Ji Tianqing nodded and hurriedly walked into the secret room. As soon as he entered the secret room, he felt that the room was filled with dense demon aura, as well as a cold chill. He raised his head to look at the center of the secret room and saw his master, Chu Tianqing, sitting on a large jade chair with a pale face. At this moment, Chu Tianqing was no longer as dignified and domineering as he was in the past. His aura was chaotic, and his body and spirit were withered. His long hair had turned snow-white and was messily draped over his shoulders. Ji Tianqing simply couldn't believe his eyes when he saw this scene. Chapter 436. Seeing Chu Tianqing's appearance, Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with sadness. He couldn't imagine how serious his master's injuries were. How could it make a Sky Origin stage cultivator so miserable? Ji Tianqing quickly walked to Chu Tianqing and said in a low voice, "Master, disciple is back." Chu Tianqing raised his head, a touch of relief in his eyes. He nodded and said in a low voice, "It's good that you're back." Ji Tianqing looked at him and saw his back was stained with blood. He quickly asked, "Master, how are your injuries? Why are they so serious?" Chu Tianqing's face was pale. He said in a low voice, "That demon is a general under the Blood Demon King. He has the innate ability of Demon Shadow 100 transformation. He took advantage of my unpreparedness and injected a rebellious bone that the Blood Demon King had nurtured for 100 years into my body. The rebellious bone of the Blood Demon King is very insidious and vicious. It's stronger than an ordinary Sky Origin stage weapon." Ji Tianqing frowned, his heart heavy and worried. "Master, you'd better go into seclusion to heal as soon as possible. Disciple believes that with the strength of our sect and the help of the elders, you'll be able to heal your injuries." Chu Tianqing shook his head and said in a serious tone, "Tianqing, I know how serious my injuries are. You don't have to worry. I'm just seriously injured. I won't die. However, the rebellious bone of the Blood Demon King contains 100 years' worth of demon chi. I'll have to go into seclusion for at least half a year to suppress my injuries. If you want to fully recover, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to complete it without 8 to 10 years. Chu Tianqing's tone became heavier and heavier. He continued, "The demon race's movements are so frequent. They'll definitely make a big move. If I go into seclusion to heal, when the demon race invades, there will be no one to preside over the situation. Our sect's situation will be very dangerous. Therefore I have to wait for you to come back. I have something to tell you face to face." Ji Tianqing understood the urgency of the situation and hurriedly said, "Please instruct me, Xueqi." Chu Tiantian looked at him and said in a serious tone, "Tianqing, before I was assassinated, I used the fated star chart to peer into the heavens and divine the future. Master has predicted that our sect will soon encounter a great calamity that has not been seen in hundreds of years. I'm afraid we will fall into an irrecoverable situation. Master isn't afraid of calamities and tribulations, nor is he afraid of death. What I'm afraid of is that the 1,000-year foundation of the Sky Pillar sect will be destroyed in my generation. Even if I die, I won't have the face to face the ancestors. You should understand the current situation. Not only is the Tianjin sect eyeing our sect covetously, but the Blood Demon King is also ready to make a move. After I go into seclusion to heal my wounds, the Great Elder is the only Heaven Origin stage cultivator left in the sect. I'm afraid he won't be able to save the sect on his own." Ji Tianqing vaguely understood Chu Tiantian's meaning. He cupped his hands in salute and said with a serious expression, "Xueqi, please rest assured. This disciple will live and die with the Sky Pillar sect. Together with the sect's elders and deacons, we will resist the invasion of the Tianjin sect and the demon race to the death." Chu Tiantian nodded slightly and squeezed out a smile on his pale face. "Tianqing, I'm deeply gratified that you can understand Master's meaning and accept his orders in the face of danger. Master believes in your willpower and determination, but, with your current strength, you won't be able to turn the tide. You won't be able to protect the sect's 1,000-year foundation. At this moment of life and death, Master has decided to bestow the sect's most sacred treasure to you. After you inherit the treasure, you will be able to reach the heaven origin stage in the shortest time possible. Ji Tianqing didn't feel much excitement in his heart. He only felt a little puzzled and incredulous. What kind of treasure could allow him to reach the heaven origin stage so quickly? Chu Tian took out a simple and mysterious dark golden treasure box from his interspatial ring. He held the dark golden treasure box with both hands and said with a solemn expression, "The sect's most sacred treasure is the heavenly feather orb left behind by our sect's founder after he passed away. 1,000 years ago, our sect's founder, Sky Pillar Spiritual Master, witnessed with his own eyes the scene of Kenshin killing a peerless demon with a single sword strike. After that, Sky Pillar Spiritual Master was fortunate enough to receive Kenshin's guidance and understand the mysteries of martial arts. Finally, he reached the limit of the heaven origin stage. Sky Pillar Spiritual Master used his great ability to move 9 mountains and formed a spirit vein on the great formation that sealed the Demon Emperor. He established the Sky Pillar sect and passed it down to this day. Unfortunately, the heaven origin stage is the limit of martial artists and also the biggest shackle of martial arts. Even someone as powerful as Sky Pillar Spiritual Master couldn't surpass the limit of a celestial being. He couldn't break through the heaven origin stage and reach the legendary higher realm. 800 years ago, Sky Pillar Spiritual Master's lifespan was exhausted and his soul returned to heaven and earth. Before he returned to heaven, he condensed the 400 years of cultivation that he refined into this heavenly feather orb and passed it down. According to our sect's ancestral teachings, when our sect encounters a great calamity of life and death, the current sect master can weigh the pros and cons and bestow the heavenly feather orb upon an elite with exceptional talent. Speaking up to here, Chu Tianqing used his true essence to open the sealing array on the dark golden box. With a solemn expression on his face, he took out a dark golden pearl that was flickering with light from the treasure box. This orb was the size of a pigeon's egg and was dark golden all over. It was as clear and flawless as glass from the inside out. Even after 800 years, this heavenly feather orb still exuded a sacred and noble aura as it fluctuated with a vast and mighty true essence aura. Chu Tianqing looked at Ji Tianqing with a solemn expression and said, "Tianqing, our sect's founder, Sky Pillar Spiritual Master, was able to reach the limit of the heaven origin stage and establish the Sky Pillar sect. This has a great relationship and origin with Kenshin. And you have the bloodline of Kenshin. It is very likely that you are a descendant of Kenshin. Today, Master will bestow the heavenly feather orb to you as repayment for Kenshin's guidance to our sect's founder back then. Presumably, if our sect's founder's spirit is in heaven, he will agree with my decision." Then, Chu Tianqing looked at Ji Tianqing with a burning gaze and shouted, "Tianqing, hold your breath and concentrate. Hold your origin and clear your mind." Ji Tianqing immediately closed his eyes and focused his mind to keep his mind clear. In the next moment, multicolored light surged in Chu Tianqing's palms as he held the heavenly feather orb and slowly inserted it into Ji Tianqing's forehead. Whoosh! The heavenly feather orb that was as clear as glass drilled into Ji Tianqing's forehead and fell into his mind. Immediately, the heavenly feather orb emitted a trace of extremely pure and majestic true yuan that flowed into his body and meridians. Ji Tianqing's body was covered in a layer of faint golden light, and his temperament became sacred and noble. After doing all this, Chu Tianqing seemed to have exhausted all his strength. A trace of relief appeared on his pale face. "Tianqing, the heavenly feather orb contains 400 years of our sect's founder's cultivation. It is the lifetime cultivation of a heaven origin stage powerhouse. With your current strength, you can't withstand the 400 years worth of cultivation. It is impossible for you to refine it quickly. From now on, you must cultivate day and night to gradually absorb the power in the heavenly feather orb. Only then can you quickly reach the heaven origin stage." Looking for a reward. Chapter 437. The energy within the heavenly levitation orb was truly too powerful and overbearing. Chu Tian was worried that Ji Tianqing would be unable to endure such a powerful energy, so he had no choice but to solemnly warn him. Taoist Master Qing Tian was a 9th-level heavenly origin stage expert, and was only a step away from the heavenly origin stage. The energy he bitterly cultivated for 400 years was terrifyingly powerful, and once it was released, it would surely destroy the heavens and the earth. Even Chu Tiantian himself was unable to completely refine the energy within the heavenly levitation orb in a short period of time. Ji Tianqing was only at the 5th level of the origin core stage, and it was even more impossible for him to endure the terrifying 400 years of energy. He could only bitterly cultivate day and night, and spend at least a year's time to be able to imperceptibly refine and absorb the energy within the heavenly levitation orb. This was the result of Chu Tiantian's estimation. As far as he was concerned, if Ji Tianqing was able to refine the heavenly levitation orb within a year and attain the strength of the heavenly origin stage, then he would be completely at ease. Tianqing, you fused with the ancestors' heavenly levitation orb. Quickly go into closed-door cultivation and increase your strength as soon as possible. Master is also going into closed-door cultivation to recuperate. During Master's closed-door cultivation, you'll temporarily take over the position of sect master and preside over the sect. The Supreme Elder will assist you, and all the elders and deacons will follow your orders. Master believes that even if the Tianjin sect and the devil race invade our sect in the near future, you'll still be able to turn the tide and protect our sect's 1,000 years of foundation. Chu Tiantian's gaze burned as he looked at Ji Tianqing, and his tone was solemn and low, as if he was making arrangements for his death. Ji Tianqing's expression was firm as he clasped his hands and bowed with a sonorous voice. Master, don't worry. Disciple will absolutely not disappoint you. Yes, Master can be at ease if that's the case. Chu Tiantian lightly nodded and waved his hand to signal Ji Tianqing to withdraw and increase his strength as soon as possible. After Ji Tianqing bid his farewell, he left Crimson Sky Peak and entered the depths of the Sky Pillar Sect's Immortal Peak. Within the Immortal Peak was the Sky Pillar Sect's most confidential forbidden area, the Immortal Cave. That place was exceptionally deserted and its defenses were extremely tight. Even if it had 3 to 5 years, no one would go there. Chu Tiansheng was recovering in seclusion within the Immortal Cave. No one would disturb him. After Ji Tianqing returned to the Tianqing courtyard, he gave some instructions to his maid, Xiao Shuang, before entering a secret chamber to cultivate in seclusion. He activated the cultivation formation in the secret room and sat cross-legged in the middle of the formation, adjusting his mind and entering a state of emptiness. He had made all the preparations, preparing to refine the power within the heavenly emergence orb. However, when he started to circulate his energy and absorb the energy from the heavenly emergence orb, he discovered that the energy was far more violent and powerful than he had imagined. With his strength, it was impossible for him to withstand the impact of the violent power. The sword veins and corporeal body in his body swelled up, as though they were about to explode. Ji Tianqing's face suddenly turned as pale as a sheet of paper. Large beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his body began to convulse and tremble. However, after the boundless power within the heavenly feather orb was activated, it continuously surged out, wantonly attacking his sword vein, head, and body, unable to be stopped at all. His sea of consciousness was impacted by the boundless power, and his consciousness became hazy. Oh no! After all, the heavenly emergence orb contains 400 years of venerable Qingtian's power. I still underestimated the power of the heavenly emergence orb. Ji Tianqing cursed inwardly, his heart filled with anxiety. At this critical moment, the black hole in his abdomen surged with an incomparably powerful devouring power, enveloping the heavenly emergence orb in his mind. Swoosh! The heavenly emergence orb was immediately sucked into the black hole and into Kenshin's tomb. 400 years of pure power turned into thousands of golden rays of light, like countless water pillars, and poured into the heavenly sword steel. The originally dark and cold heavenly sword steel only had a trace of spirit chi surrounding it. After devouring the heavenly emergence orb, the spirit chi surrounding the heavenly sword steel became denser and denser, and it actually emitted a 5-colored glow. Ji Tianqing also felt relieved. His body returned to normal, and his consciousness became clear. He was finally out of danger. He felt the change in the black hole and immediately guessed the reason. Was it the burial of heaven that saved me? Thinking of this, he condensed his consciousness and passed through the black hole in his dantian, entering Kenshin's tomb. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing's consciousness condensed into his appearance, turning into a translucent little person, and appeared in the dark and cold space. He flew across the sky above the wilderness, and soon arrived at the black heavenly sword steel. Of the 9 tombstones to the left of the heavenly sword steel, 6 of them had become blank. Only the last 3 tombstones were engraved with the 7th, 8th, and 9th level of the Path of the Sword. Ji Tianqing looked up at the heavenly sword steel, and saw the dense spirit qi surrounding the heavenly sword steel, emitting a dense 5-colored glow. Previously, when he was trapped in the soul-refining cauldron, his consciousness entered Kenshin's tomb, and saw that the heavenly sword steel was still cold and dark. But now the heavenly sword steel had undergone such a huge change, which confirmed Ji Tianqing's conjecture. Burial of Heaven, was it you who saved me? Ji Tianqing looked up at the heavenly sword steel, and shouted with his mind. From within the heavenly sword steel, Burial of Heaven's vigorous and ancient voice immediately sounded. That's right. With your current strength, you are still unable to withstand the hundreds of years' worth of power in the heavenly levitation orb. However, I can quickly refine the power in the heavenly levitation orb, and help you increase your strength rapidly. Ji Tianqing nodded, and said with a calm expression, you can devour the power in the heavenly levitation orb, and then transfer it to me. In this way, I can increase my strength quickly, and you can recover your primordial qi faster. It's a win-win situation. Burial of Heaven's vigorous voice said solemnly, don't waste time, start cultivating as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing nodded, and his consciousness left Kenshin's tomb, and returned to his body. After that, he sat upright in the secret chamber and concentrated on cultivating. Burial of Heaven also transferred a vast amount of power, which surged out of the black hole, into his sword embryo. The sword embryo continuously fused with the power, and it grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ji Tianqing cultivated the 6th level of the Sword Heart Tao, and he tried to open up new meridians. Time silently flowed by, and the secret chamber was silent. Unknowingly, a day had passed. Ji Tianqing relied on the pure power that Burial of Heaven transferred to him to successfully open up 2 meridians, and he tempered them into sword veins. 18 sword veins were finally formed, and he'd finally completed cultivating the 6th level of the Sword Heart Tao. His strength had smoothly attained the 6th level of the Origin Core stage. Next, he started cultivating the 7th level of the Sword Heart Tao. The 7th level of the Sword Heart Tao required him to open up 36 apertures in his body. Every 12 apertures opened up, his strength would increase by 1 level. Ji Tianqing understood that the Sword Heart Tao was a cultivation method that helped him cultivate his fleshly body to the limit. Ordinary martial artists only had 9 meridians and 72 apertures in their bodies, and the power contained within was limited, and the might of their true essence was limited as well. Once he cultivated the 7th level of the Sword Heart Tao, he would possess 18 sword veins and 108 apertures. Chapter 438. 2 days passed quickly. Ji Tianqing bitterly cultivated the 7th level of the Sword Heart Tao in the private room, and he only used a short day to successfully open 12 apertures. His strength increased once more, and he reached the 7th level of the Origin Core stage. Along with the passage of time, the Burial of Heaven endlessly supplied him with strength, and he cultivated with all his strength, causing his strength to increase explosively at an extremely high speed. 3 days later, he opened 24 apertures, and his strength reached the 8th level of the Origin Core stage. He possessed 18 sword veins and 96 apertures, and his combat strength far surpassed martial artists of the same cultivation by a few times. From this moment onwards, no one below the Sky Origin stage was a match for him. Even if he encountered a half-step Sky Origin stage expert like Ghost Eye, he would still be able to defeat him. However, Ji Tianqing ended his 3 days of closed-door cultivation and didn't continue cultivating. In a short 3 days, his strength increased explosively by 3 levels. This was absolutely unbelievable, a miracle that shook the martial Dao world. A rapid increase in strength would surely cause the foundation of the martial Dao to be unstable. Just like a pavilion in the sky, even if it was 3 kilometers tall, it would still collapse in the end. So after Ji Tianqing reached the 8th level of the Origin Core stage, he temporarily stopped cultivating and prepared to properly consolidate his foundation of the martial Dao. Right at this moment, the Burial of Heaven's voice sounded out in his mind. Ji Tianqing, I've already helped you refine the strength within the levitation pearl. In the future, when your foundation stabilizes, your strength will still increase explosively by leaps and bounds when you continue cultivating. Moreover, I've recovered 30% of my strength, and I want to give you a pleasant surprise. When he heard the Burial of Heaven's voice, Ji Tianqing was able to sense that his consciousness had formed a subtle mental connection with the Burial of Heaven. In this way, his consciousness didn't need to enter the Kenshin's tomb and was able to contact the Burial of Heaven at any time. He sent a voice transmission with his heart and asked the burial of heaven in his mind. What pleasant surprise! The dignified voice of the burial of heaven that was filled with the vicissitudes of life sounded out in his mind. Carefully look at your right palm. When he heard this, Ji Tianqing unconsciously lowered his head and stared at the center of his right palm. An egg-sized black hole had actually appeared out of thin air on his right palm that was sparkling and translucent like jade. Within the black hole was a bottomless vortex that was like an abyss. Staring at the black hole for a while longer would cause one's consciousness to become blurred. Ji Tianqing could clearly sense that the black hole in his palm was connected to the heaven-span sword steel in the sword god's tomb. The burial of heaven's sword of heaven's strength. The black hole of heaven's cultivation would be able to replenish the of heaven's strength. Or perhaps, the heavenly sword steel could release an attack that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. Through the black hole in his palm, it could kill all the powerful enemies. A satisfied smile appeared on Ji Tianqing's face when he understood this. Of it. In this way, I can control the black hole as I wish. I have another trump card. The burial of heaven also said in a gratified tone, Ji Tianqing, we had an agreement back then. I will help you increase your strength, and you will help me recover my strength. Our fates are one. We are bound together for good or ill. Now that I have swallowed the heaven's levitation orb, my cultivation and strength have recovered to 30%, which can greatly increase your combat strength. Even if you are facing a heaven's prime expert, I can guarantee that you will not be defeated. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but frown. He asked in confusion, Burial of Heaven, the heaven's levitation orb contains 400 years of cultivation from Qing Tian Zhenren. How can it only help you recover to 30% of your strength? The burial of heaven snorted arrogantly and said, I am the soul of the divine sword. At my peak, I can shake the heavens and earth, and shatter the sun, moon and stars. It is only a lifetime of cultivation from a heaven's prime expert. It is already a miracle that I can recover to 30% of my strength. I see. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. He was full of expectation and yearning for the power of shaking the heavens and earth, and shattering the sun, moon and stars. After a moment of silence, he asked again, Burial of Heaven, why is the heaven's prime stage called the limit of heaven's prime and the biggest shackle of martial arts? What is the stage above the heaven's prime stage? The burial of heaven said solemnly, the body and martial arts of the heaven's prime stage have both reached the limit. This is the end of martial arts. Even so, a heaven's prime stage martial artist only has a lifespan of 300 to 500 years. Once his lifespan is up, he will die. If his body is destroyed, he will die immediately. Then have you ever imagined what a martial artist should cultivate after his body has reached the limit? Why can those experts who have surpassed the heaven's prime stage have a lifespan of thousands of years? Even if his body is destroyed, he can still keep a trace of his soul. After listening to the burial of heaven's explanation, Ji Tianqing felt as if he was suddenly enlightened. The doubts and guesses that had been lingering in his heart all this time immediately vanished like smoke, and he became suddenly enlightened. In this way, the stage above the heaven's prime stage is to cultivate the soul? That's right. The burial of heaven said solemnly, however, you're only at the 8th level of the origin core stage now. You haven't even reached the heaven's prime stage. Isn't it too far-fetched to think about this? After he finished speaking, the burial of heaven didn't say anything and continued to sleep and cultivate. Ji Tianqing withdrew his right palm and concealed the black hole at the center of his palm. He started to cultivate and consolidate his martial Dao foundation. Misty Moon Mountain Range 600 miles east of Flame Spirit City. A pitch-black devil mist and a grayish-white ghost mist flew at extreme speed in the mountain range. After a short moment, 2 balls of dense fog landed outside the temporary devil cave, and 2 figures appeared. These 2 people were Blood Demon King, who was over 3 meters tall, and Granny Ghost, who was as thin as a monkey. The 2 of them stood outside the devil cave and frowned as they looked at the cave entrance that had collapsed and was filled with rubble. Their faces immediately became gloomy. Blood Demon King stared coldly at the cave entrance and said in a ghastly tone, The cave entrance has collapsed, and the defensive formation that I set up has been destroyed as well. How could this be? Could it be that there was a great battle inside the cave? Granny Ghost stretched out her dove-headed walking stick and pointed at the 10,000 feet tall mountain, and said in a cold voice, The entire mountain has many ravines cracked open, and countless earth and boulders have collapsed. Only a heaven's prime stage powerhouse can cause such a terrifying destructive force. Blood Demon King's brows tightly knit together, and he said in a deep voice, "Could it be that Chu Tianxing or Xiang Wuji found this place? Come, let's go in and take a look." After he finished speaking, Blood Demon King and Granny Ghost turned into devil mist and passed through the narrow cave entrance and entered the devil cave. After the two of them carefully checked inside the devil cave, they found that more than half of the devil cave had collapsed, and there were rubble and earth everywhere. There were traces of blood flame, soul flame, and some kind of true fire everywhere in the cave, but there was no trace of the High Priestess and Ji Tianxing. In the end, Granny Ghost used a secret technique to find a handful of black ashes in the rubble. After Blood Demon King carefully identified it, he confirmed that it was the ashes of the High Priestess. This result made Blood Demon King so angry that his face turned dark, and his body trembled. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. His eyes were bloodshot as he roared, "Damn bastard! The High Priestess is dead, and Ji Tianxing has also escaped. Sky Pillar Sex bastards! This king will never let you go." Granny Ghost's eyes flickered with flames as she said in a deep voice, "Blood Demon King, now all the demon generals and experts under your command are dead. Only the two of us are left. I'm afraid it's a bit unrealistic for us to kill our way into the Sky Pillar sect and rescue the sealed Demon King." Blood Demon King took a few deep breaths and suppressed his fury. He said in a cold voice, "That's right. Therefore, this king has decided to return to the Blood Demon tribe and gather the elite warriors of my Blood Demon tribe. Granny Ghost, you should also go to the Myriad Souls Cliff and gather the sleeping ghost army there. Soon, we will destroy the Sky Pillar sect in one fell swoop." Granny Ghost pondered for a moment and nodded in agreement. Chapter 439. Tianjin Sect. Inside the Divine Sword Palace. In a dimly lit secret room full of spiritual energy, Tianjin Sect Master Gao Yi sat on a fiery jade throne, looking at guest Huangfu, who was standing solemnly in front of him, with a somewhat displeased expression. "Guest Huangfu, Daoist Tianji has been missing for nearly 10 days. Haven't you found him yet?" Guest Huangfu cupped his hands in salute and said with a solemn expression, "Sect Master, I've sent people to investigate. Daoist Tianji left the sect after we went to the Sky Pillar sect to visit the Emperor. From then on, he never came back." Seeing Gao Yi's angry expression and worry, guest Huangfu thought to himself, that damned Daoist Tianji. Since he entered the sect, he's been giving advice to the sect master and stealing my limelight. Now that he's disappeared, it's best if he never comes back." Although he thought so, he still had to comfort Gao Yi on the surface. "Sect Master, Daoist Tianji isn't a member of the Tianjin sect. This kind of expert who calls himself Daoist Tianji doesn't have a fixed residence and travels everywhere. It's impossible for him to stay in the sect forever. Although Daoist Tianji left the sect and made you lose a capable person, I've always been loyal to you. However, I have always been loyal to you and will still do my best to manage the affairs of the sect for you." Gao Yi's expression eased a lot. He nodded slightly and said, "Guest Huangfu, you're right. I won't mention Daoist Tianji for the time being. Tell me about the matter I asked you to investigate. Have you found anything?" Guest Huangfu nodded and said with a solemn expression, "Sect Master, I've carefully investigated and confirmed that someone saw the Emperor leave on a dragon 6 days ago." Gao Yi nodded slightly and sneered. He said in a deep voice, "No wonder Chu Tianji didn't say anything and drove away all the people from the sects." Previously, when the Emperor was in the Sky Pillar sect, Chu Tianji was showing off in front of all the sects and acted like the overlord of the Tianjin region. Now that the Emperor has left quietly, there's no one to back him up. He'll be obedient immediately." Guest Elder Huangfu frowned slightly and said angrily, "Sect Master, we were still waiting for the Emperor to preside over the situation and seek justice for our sect. I didn't expect the Emperor to leave quietly. Obviously, he can't uphold justice for our sect. We can only rely on ourselves to take revenge. Moreover, I've already heard that the Emperor left quietly this time to return to the Imperial Court to mobilize the Imperial Army. The Son of Heaven has already joined forces with the Sky-bearing sect. He wants to mobilize a large number of experts and Imperial Guards to protect the Sky-bearing sect, lest the Sky-bearing sect be besieged by the various large sects. Sect leader, we can't wait any longer. It's impossible for the Emperor to seek justice for us. We can only take action against the Sky Pillar sect before the Son of Heaven returns with the army. Only then can we take revenge." Hearing this news, Gao Yi's face suddenly changed, and he asked in shock, "What? The Son of Heaven wants to mobilize the Imperial Guards to protect the Sky Pillar sect? How is this possible? What right does the Sky Pillar sect have? Why should the Emperor mobilize an army to protect them? It's clearly us who are being bullied by the Sky Pillar sect, and we need justice and protection the most." Guest Elder Huangfu said solemnly, "Sect leader, the news this subordinate heard is basically true. Moreover, from the various signs after the Son of Heaven arrived at the Sky Pillar sect, the Son of Heaven has no intention of seeking justice for our sect. If we want to take revenge on the Sky Pillar sect, we must hurry up and take action before the Son of Heaven returns to the Sky Pillar sect. If we're late, we'll be the ones to suffer." Gao Yi frowned as he pondered, still somewhat hesitant. At this moment, Guest Elder Huangfu said with a solemn expression, "Sect leader, you don't have to worry about this matter. Just now, that lord quietly arrived at our sect, and this subordinate personally went to kneel and welcome him. With that lord overseeing things, you can rest assured." Before he could finish speaking, Gao Yi's expression changed drastically, and he stood up with a bang. "What? The lord has arrived at our sect? Where is he? Quickly bring this seat to welcome him." Gao Yi's tone was very excited, but there was not much joy in it, and more reverence and fear. His face was full of anxiety, and he immediately wanted to kneel and welcome the Lord, fearing that a great disaster would befall him if he was a step late. At this moment, the door to the secret room automatically opened. A voice that was as deep as thunder, and it was impossible to tell whether it was a man or a woman, or an age, entered the secret room. "No need." As the strange voice fell, a tall and straight man's figure stepped into the secret room with dragon-like steps. This person was tall and burly, and he wore a long golden robe with a wide dark purple cloak draped over his shoulders. He exuded a dignified and domineering aura of a powerhouse, as well as an incomparably noble aura. When he stepped into the secret room, the originally calm air in the secret room was squeezed into an invisible vortex by the aura of a powerhouse emitted from his body. Even the five-colored spirit chi that filled the air disappeared one after another, as if it was afraid of the golden-robed man's domineering aura and had hidden away. This man in a golden robe with a purple cloak draped over his shoulders was wearing half an exquisite crystal mask on his face. Crystals were almost transparent, but the crystal mask worn by the golden-robed man was obviously a wonderful treasure. No matter how one looked at it with their eyes or divine sense, they could not see the cheeks behind the mask, only a hazy gray shadow. The crystal mask covered half of the golden-robed man's face, and only a pair of bright red phoenix eyes could be seen. That pair of unique red phoenix eyes contained an indescribable charm, and a heart-palpitating majesty and domineering aura. When the golden-robed man looked at Gao Yi, an invisible pressure enveloped Gao Yi's body. Gao Yi's body shook, and he knelt on the ground in fear and trepidation, and kowtowed respectfully. Subordinate Gao Yi welcomes the Lord's arrival. Guest Huangfu's face was also full of piety, and he hurriedly knelt on the ground and kowtowed again and again. The golden-robed man walked straight to the center of the secret room, flung the dark purple cloak behind him, and sat on the jade throne. He glanced at Guest Huangfu indifferently, and Guest Huangfu's face suddenly turned pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He had no right to speak here, so he tactfully bowed and left the secret room. The secret room quieted down, leaving only the golden-robed man sitting on the throne and Gao Yi kneeling on the ground. The golden-robed man remained silent, and the room was filled with a dignified and cold aura. The atmosphere was almost frozen. Gao Yi knelt in front of the golden-robed man, and his heart was in his throat. He did not even dare to breathe loudly, and his back was covered in cold sweat. He knew very well that in the past 10 years, the Lord had only sent people to deliver orders every 2 or 3 years, and had never personally come to the Tianjian sect. Chapter 440. Since the golden-robed man did not speak, Gao Yi did not dare to take the initiative to ask anything. He could only lower his head and wait for the exalted Lord's orders or punishment in the most respectful and humble manner. Finally, the golden-robed man said in a strange voice, "Gao Yi, this exalted Lord is very disappointed in you." Hearing this, Gao Yi's body trembled. He was so scared that his face turned pale and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He prostrated himself on the ground and said in a hoarse voice, "This subordinate is incompetent. Please punish me, exalted Lord." The exalted Lord ignored him and said indifferently, "Among the 9 regions of the southern continent, the other 8 regions are ruled by overlords. Only the Tianqian region does not have an overlord and is directly ruled by the imperial court. The Sky Pillar sect is the leader of the 8 great sects and controls the ancient star realm. It is equivalent to the overlord of the Tianqian region. In the past 10 years, the Tianjin sect has developed so quickly, but you have repeatedly missed the opportunity to replace the Sky Pillar sect and control the Tianqian region for this exalted lord. Gao Yi hurriedly said respectfully, "Exalted lord, the reason why our sect has such strength and foundation today is all because of your support and nurturing over the past 10 years. This subordinate and everyone in the sect is willing to serve you, exalted lord, to repay your kindness in nurturing us. However, the Sky Pillar sect is a great sect with 1,000 years of inheritance. Its foundation is abnormally deep. This subordinate does not dare to make decisions on his own, nor does he dare to rashly start a war to avoid failing at the last step." At this point, Gao Yi paused and looked up to see the exalted lord's reaction. Seeing that the exalted lord had no intention of interrupting him, he carefully continued, "Half a month ago, this subordinate wanted to seize the opportunity and decisively declare war on the Sky Pillar sect. However, the emperor came to the Sky Pillar sect with the imperial court's imperial edict. The emperor intends to protect the Sky Pillar sect, so this subordinate does not dare to act rashly. This subordinate also heard that the emperor has quietly returned to the imperial court to mobilize an army to protect the Sky Pillar sect." The golden-robed man frowned as contempt flashed in his eyes. He said coldly, "Long Yunxiao's forces are limited to the central continent. What does he have to protect the Sky Pillar sect? As for mobilizing an army to protect the Sky Pillar sect, that is even more nonsense. He is only the imperial court's heir and does not have the right to command an army." Hearing these words, Gao Yi's spirit suddenly shook, his eyes surging with light and joy. "I see, I understand." The golden-robed man glanced at him indifferently and said in a dignified voice, "Now is the best time. If you continue to delay my plan, you and the Tianjin sect will cease to exist." Gao Yi's body trembled again. Fear and dread flashed in his eyes. He quickly kowtowed and said, "Please calm down, my lord. This subordinate understands what to do. This subordinate will go make arrangements and prepare to wage war against the Sky Pillar sect." The golden-robed man narrowed his eyes and shouted in a deep voice, "Fool! How can the Heavenly Sword sect replace the Sky Pillar sect with just the strength of the Heavenly Sword sect?" As he spoke, he stretched out his right hand. With a flash of light, a sandalwood scroll appeared in his palm. The golden-robed man flicked his hand, and the scroll flew towards Gao Yi. "This is my plan. You just need to execute it." Gao Yi quickly received the sandalwood scroll with both hands and respectfully held it in his palm. He solemnly said, "This subordinate will follow your orders, my lord. This subordinate will do his best and will not let you down." The golden-robed man looked up at the door of the secret chamber and said in a deep voice, "Tuoba Rue, come in." Following his order, the door of the secret chamber was opened from the outside. A burly red-haired young man wearing black leather armor stepped into the secret chamber with a dignified appearance. The burly young man's facial features were as sharp as a sculpture, and his eyes were red like 2 balls of flames. Although he was only 15 or 16 years old, his body was abnormally tall and sturdy, exuding a violent and intrepid aura. He was the Tuoba Rue that the golden-robed man spoke of. Whether it was his figure, appearance or temperament, he did not look like a human. Tuoba Rue walked into the secret chamber and came before the golden-robed man. He respectfully bowed and saluted. "Tuoba Rue greets adoptive father. Please instruct me." The golden-robed man nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "Tuoba Rue, follow Gao Yi and cooperate with him to carry out my plan." "Understood." Tuoba Rue cupped his hands and saluted. Then, Tuoba Rue followed Gao Yi, who was holding the scroll with both hands, out of the secret chamber. Only the golden-robed man was left in the secret chamber. He looked coldly at the door of the secret chamber. His gaze seemed to penetrate millions of miles of space and see the distant Central State Imperial Court. He murmured in a low voice, "After the Sky Pillar sect is destroyed, there will be a good show to watch. Central State has been peaceful for 1,000 years. It's time to create a big trouble for the old man. The Imperial Court should also be in chaos. I'd like to see how capable Long Yun Xiao, that immature brat, is to secure his position as the crown prince." Speaking of this, a cold smile filled with hatred flashed in the depths of his eyes. Ji Tianqing cultivated in the secret chamber for another 2 days and temporarily stabilized his martial arts foundation. Now that Chu Tianxing had entered the immortal cave to recuperate, he temporarily took over the position of sect master and managed the affairs of the sect. He couldn't continue cultivating and could only move to the Sky Pillar Hall on Crimson Firmament Peak. With the help of the elders, he quickly familiarized himself with and dealt with the various affairs of the sect. Early in the morning, Ji Tianxing held a routine meeting in the Sky Pillar Hall. He discussed the next plan with the elders and issued a series of orders. 2 hours later, the meeting ended and the elders left the hall one after another. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were the last to leave. The two walked out of the hall side by side and discussed the next plan as they walked. At this moment, a black-robed deacon hurriedly crossed the square and quickly arrived in front of the two. The black-robed deacon cupped his hands and saluted Ji Tianxing. Then, he took out a sealed letter. Acting Sect Master. Just now, an elder of the Tianjin sect came to our sect and presented this letter of challenge. He specifically said that he wanted to give it to Yun Yao. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. A cold light flashed in his eyes. The Tianjin sect actually dared to take the initiative to issue a letter of challenge? Let me see. Yun Yao calmly took the letter. After opening the envelope, she took out a piece of xian paper from it. There were hundreds of words written on the xian paper. The words were vigorous and forceful, containing a fierce and frightening sword intent. It was very arrogant and overbearing. The contents of the letter of challenge were even more confident and arrogant. After Yun Yao finished reading the letter of challenge, she put away the envelope. She calmly said to Ji Tianxing, "The Tianjin sect has a new chief disciple named Tuobaru. Chapter 441. How arrogant! Ji Tianxing shouted with a cold expression, reminding Yun Yao, eldest senior sister, the name Tuobaru is a bit unfamiliar. I'm afraid this is a conspiracy of the Tianjin sect. Yun Yao frowned slightly and shook her head gently. I also understand that the Tianjin sect is definitely up to no good. But the Tianjin sect has blatantly issued a challenge. This matter is related to the face and honor of my sect and mine. How can I avoid it? Ji Tianxing naturally understood this and nodded slightly. Eldest senior sister, since that is the case, I will accompany you to the star platform. No need. Yun Yao shook her head gently and said in a solemn tone, now is an eventful time. Master is in seclusion to recuperate. You are the temporary sect master and must stay in the sect. I will go alone. Since the other party issued a challenge to me openly on the star platform, there shouldn't be any danger. Since Yun Yao had made up her mind, Ji Tianxing couldn't say anything more and could only exhort, eldest senior sister, you must be careful. It's best if you take 2 guards with you. If anything happens, contact me immediately. And don't worry. Yun Yao nodded and stepped out of the square. After a while, she rode the white crane spirit beast, left the Sky Pillar sect, and rushed to the star platform. Ji Tianxing stood in the square in front of the palace and watched the spirit crane disappear into the sky before turning around and returning to his residence in the Sky Pillar sect. He entered the secret room, opened the 100 treasures brocade pouch, and called out to Qian Yu and the little black dragon. Qian Yu and the little black dragon had been unconscious for 4 days and finally woke up under the call of his spirit sense. However, they were still very weak and their injuries were still very serious. Their souls were burned by the blue soul fire, which caused them to fall unconscious and sleep for 4 days. Ji Tianxing used the Sleeping Dragon Ascension secret art to help Qian Yu and the little black dragon get rid of the soul fire in their bodies. Unknowingly, a day passed. The soul fires in Qian Yu and the little black dragon's bodies were dispelled and their injuries stabilized. Ji Tianxing then took out more than a dozen spirit pills and spirit fruits from a secret compartment in the secret chamber, and let them take them to recover their strength. Qian Yu and the little black dragon only needed to sleep in the 100 treasures brocade pouch and recuperate for 10 days to half a month. Their injuries and cultivation would be fully recovered. After doing all this, Ji Tianxing stopped and sat down to meditate. Half a day later, he had recovered all his energy and ended his cultivation. He got up and left the secret room, walking towards the White Cloud Hall where Yun Yao lived. He estimated the time in his heart. It would take about 12 hours to rush from the Sky Pillar sect to the star platform. The round trip would take an entire day. After Yun Yao arrived at the star platform, her battle with the chief disciple of the Tianjin sect would end in at most 2 to 4 hours. Now that 1.5 days had passed, Yun Yao should be back. At this time, night had fallen and a bright moon was hanging high in the sky. The sky was densely covered with stars. Half a quarter of an hour later, Ji Tianqing arrived at the gate of the White Cloud Hall. Two young maids rushed to greet him and quickly bowed to him. Ji Tianqing asked, "Has senior sister returned?" The two maids quickly shook their heads and answered truthfully, "Senior sister hasn't returned since she left the sect yesterday." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing suddenly frowned and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. With the speed of the white crane, senior sister should have returned by now. Could it be that she met with an accident? Or is there something holding you back? Ji Tianqing was a little worried and told the two maids, "If senior sister returns, quickly come to the Sky Pillar Hall and report to me." After saying this, he turned around and left the White Cloud Hall. He returned to the secret chamber in the Sky Pillar Hall and continued to meditate and cultivate. Unknowingly, a long night had passed. Ji Tianqing waited patiently for the whole night, but the maids of the White Cloud Hall did not come to report. The next morning, the worry in his heart grew more and more, and he faintly had a bad premonition. Therefore, he ended his meditation and summoned the ninth elder. He asked the ninth elder to take a few guards and personally go to the star platform to check the situation. After the ninth elder learned of the situation, he immediately took a few guards and rode the spirit bird to the star platform as fast as lightning. Ji Tianqing sat in the Sky Pillar Hall and waited for news with a heart full of worry. 12 hours passed and it was night again, but Yun Yao still had not returned to the Sky Pillar sect. Ji Tianqing sat in the Sky Pillar Hall and waited, feeling more and more uneasy. At this time, a messenger pigeon flew through the dark night and into the Sky Pillar Hall. The pigeon landed beside Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing quickly took a copper tube from its leg and took out a piece of paper from it. The piece of paper was a message from the ninth elder. It only had a few words, but it made Ji Tianqing's expression change instantly. "There is no one on the star platform. There is no trace of Yun Yao." After reading this sentence, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Something has happened to senior sister. That damned Heavenly Sword sect. Sure enough, this is their scheme. In the entire Sky Pillar sect, there were only two people he was most worried about and concerned about. One was Ji Ku, and the other was Yun Yao. The Tianjin sect had used the matter of the letter of challenge to plot against Yun Yao. This touched his reverse scale, and caused a strong sense of anger and killing intent to rise in his heart. Dragons have reverse scales, and those who touch them will definitely die. In Ji Tianqing's heart, there were also people he wanted to protect with his life, and Yun Yao was one of them. After that, he ordered the black-robed guard outside the hall, "Go and report to the first elder. Ask him to stay in the sect. I'm going to the Tianjin sect to look for senior sister." The black-robed guard bowed and received the order. He quickly rushed to First Elder Mu Yunhai's residence to report the news. Ji Tianqing stood up with a cold expression and was about to leave the Sky Pillar Hall. At this time hurriedly walked into the hall. In the past month, he had been cultivating in seclusion to break through the shackles of the Origin Core stage. Just last night, he successfully broke through the shackles and reached the first level of the Origin Core stage, becoming the youngest Origin Core stage powerhouse in the Tianjin region. Early this morning, heard that the Tianjin sect had issued a letter of challenge and that Yun Yao had not returned. He had been worried about this. When he saw Ji Tianqing's murderous aura, hurriedly asked, "Senior brother Tianqing, where are you going?" Ji Tianqing said with a cold expression, "I'm going to the Tianjin sect to save senior sister." Said without hesitation, "I'll go with you." "No, you stay in the sect and wait for my news," Ji Tianqing instructed with a solemn expression. He quickly left the Sky Pillar Hall, spread his wings, and flew into the night sky. He knew very well that if he went to the Tianjin sect to save Yun Yao tonight, he would most likely have to fight with the Tianjin sect. Chapter 442. Ji Tianqing flapped his golden wings, turned into a golden stream of light, and flew across the night sky towards the Tianjin sect. As the night deepened, his expression and eyes became even colder, and killing intent surged in his eyes. The Tianjin sect was actually so brazen as to make a move on Yun Yao. He couldn't help but wonder if the Tianjin sect had decided to shed all pretense of cordiality and start a war with the Sky Pillar sect. In addition to looking for Yun Yao, he also wanted to test the Tianjin sect's true attitude. This was the reason why he went to the Tianjin sect alone. 6 hours later, Ji Tianqing finally arrived at the Tianjin sect and landed outside the Tianjin sect's mountain gate. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning. The bright moon in the night sky had already set in the west, and the light was somewhat dim. Under the night sky, the Tianjin sect was quiet and peaceful, as if it had fallen into a deep sleep. 20 guards were standing guard at the foot of the mountain gate. All of them were wearing white robes and carrying swords. Their eyes were bright and spirited. When the guards saw Ji Tianqing, their eyes and auras suddenly became sharp and fierce, and they all looked at him in unison. "Who are you?" The tall and sturdy guard captain, holding a black scabbard sword, rushed in front of Ji Tianqing in a flash and blocked his path. "Who are you? Why did you break into our Tianjin sect in the middle of the night?" The guard captain stared at Ji Tianqing with sharp eyes. His whole body was full of vigilance and vigilance. His right hand was holding the hilt of his sword, ready to draw it and launch a thunderous attack at any time. Ji Tianqing suppressed the anger and killing intent in his heart and said expressionlessly, "Go and report to your sect master. Ji Tianqing from the Sky Pillar sect wants to see him." Ji Tianqing? When the guard captain heard this name, his eyes suddenly glared, and deep hatred and killing intent gushed out from the depths of his eyes. He glared at Ji Tianqing and sneered contemptuously, "You're Ji Tianqing from the Sky Pillar sect? Ha ha ha. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror? Who are you? What right do you have to call our sect master by his name? What qualifications do you have to see our sect master?" Ji Tianqing's eyes turned cold. He stared sharply at the guard captain and shouted in a deep voice, "I'll give you one last chance. Go and report to Gao Yi and tell him to come see me. Or tell him to hand over my senior sister, Yun Yao." However, before he could finish speaking, the captain of the guards roared with murderous intent, "Otherwise my ass. How dare you threaten the sect leader of our sect? You're courting death." As he spoke, the captain of the guards drew his sword and unleashed all of his power, slashing at Ji Tianqing with all his might. The guard captain, who was at the 8th stage of the Tongxian stage, used all his strength to slash out a 3-meter-long sword ray. It was like a dazzling, cold waterfall. The sword ray emitted a biting cold air and a strong killing intent. It went straight for Ji Tianqing's head. Obviously, the guard captain was not trying to scare Ji Tianqing. He wanted to take Ji Tianqing's life. Ji Tianqing's figure flashed and turned into a golden afterimage. Instead of retreating, he rushed toward the guard captain. In an instant, he rushed 20 meters away, brushed past the cold sword ray, and arrived in front of the guard captain. "You're courting death," Ji Tianqing shouted coldly. His left hand stretched out like lightning and grabbed the guard captain's throat like an eagle's claw. The guard captain had no time to dodge or resist. His neck was immediately grabbed. Ji Tianqing twisted his left hand and broke the guard captain's neck. Crack! With the sound of bones breaking, the guard captain's eyes rolled back. Dark red blood flowed out of his mouth. He died on the spot. The 20 white-robed guards at the foot of the mountain gate all stared at Ji Tianqing with their mouths agape. They were completely dumbfounded. No one had expected Ji Tianqing's strength to be so terrifying. He had easily dodged the guard captain's full-force sword strike and killed him in one move. What they couldn't believe the most was that this was the territory of the Heavenly Sword Sect. Ji Tianqing had come here alone, so how could he dare to kill someone so arrogantly? However, the white-robed guards were stunned for only a moment before they came to their senses. "The captain is dead. Damn Ji Tianqing, he killed the captain. He's too arrogant. Brothers, let's go. Kill Ji Tianqing. Avenge the captain." Many white-robed guards let out angry roars and roars as they drew their swords and charged towards Ji Tianqing. Suddenly, the sound of swords being drawn could be heard. 20 cold lights lit up at the foot of the mountain gate. All the guards threw themselves at Ji Tianqing without any regard for their own safety. They waved their swords and slashed out powerful sword lights. They besieged Ji Tianqing. Swish, swish, swish. At that moment, dozens of 3-meter-long sword lights cut through the dark night and enveloped Ji Tianqing's figure from all directions. Ji Tianqing threw the guard captain's body on the ground. His eyes were filled with cold, murderous intent. He waved his palms and rushed into the crowd to fight with the guards. He was wearing a white robe. On his back was a pair of golden wings formed by the Kenshin battle robe. Relying on the invincible defense of the golden wings, he ignored the attacks of the guards. His palms continuously struck out golden light palm shadows at the white-robed guards. Suddenly, the golden light palm exploded with an unparalleled power, sending the white-robed guards flying. Bang! 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 A series of muffled sounds exploded, reverberating in the night sky. All the white-robed guards who were hit by the golden light palm shadows spat out blood and fell unconscious at the foot of the mountain gate. The few guards who were not unconscious were also severely injured. They could only lie on the ground and wail. They could not get up to fight again. The swordlights of the guards were either dodged by Ji Tianqing or blocked by the golden wings. After all, these 20 white-robed guards were all at the 6th or 7th level of the mystic enlightening realm. They could not hurt Ji Tianqing at all. Ji Tianqing turned into a golden blur, flashing and shuttling in and out of the crowd. He was as fast as lightning, throwing out palm shadows that blotted out the sky. In just 10 breaths, the dull sounds of bang, bang, bang stopped. The 20 white-robed guards were lying on the ground in a mess. They were all seriously injured. Ji Tianqing was not injured at all. His white robe was not stained with dust or blood. He ignored the guards who were lying on the ground and wailing. He stepped over the mountain gate of the Tianjin sect and walked steadily up the wide stone steps to the mountainside. Tonight, he was angry because of a beauty and came to find Yun Yao. His original intention was not to start a massacre. However, the people of the Tianjin sect were unreasonable. They spoke rudely and attacked first. They wanted to take his life on the spot. In this case, he had to kill to show his power. The guards of the Tianjin sect were despicable, shameless, and unreasonable. He would use his fists to reason with them. The people of the Tianjin sect hated him to the core. If they wanted to stop him from saving Yun Yao, he would kill his way out. Whoever dared to stop him would only end up dead. A new day, please recommend me. Chapter 443. Behind the Tianjin sect's mountain gate was a 30-meter-wide staircase that led straight to the peak of the mountain. The Divine Sword Palace was located at the peak of the mountain. It was the residence of the sect leader, Gao Yi. Ji Tianqing stepped on the limestone steps and looked at the Divine Sword Palace at the peak of the mountain with a determined gaze. His body exuded an unstoppable domineering aura. The commotion at the foot of the mountain gate quickly alerted the Tianjin sect's guards and deacons. When Ji Tianqing walked 300 steps along the stone steps, he was blocked by a group of Tianjin sect's experts. There were 18 people in this group of experts. The leaders were 2 black deacons who were at the 5th level of the origin core stage. The other 16 people were Tianjin sect's guards. Their strength was between the 5th and 7th level of the mystic comprehending stage. 18 warriors rushed to Ji Tianqing's side as fast as a gust of wind, then spread out and surrounded him. Swish! 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 The 16 guards drew their swords and pointed them at Ji Tianqing. Their bodies were filled with murderous intent. The 2 black deacons walked over with gloomy expressions. They glared at Ji Tianqing coldly and shouted angrily. Ji Tianqing, how dare you trespass into our Tianjin sect and kill our sect's guards? How arrogant! Your Sky Pillar sect has gone too far. A mere sect leader's disciple dares to trespass into our Tianjin sect alone. Do you really think no one in our sect can kill you? The 2 black deacons' faces were filled with rage. Their bodies were filled with murderous intent. Ji Tianqing glanced at them indifferently and said in a deep voice, "Ask Gao Yi to come and see me. Hand over my eldest senior sister, Yun Yao. Otherwise, I'll trespass into the Divine Sword Palace." The black deacon on the left was stunned. He said with a startled expression, "What, Yun Yao? Why did you come to our sect to look for Yun Yao? Are you out of your mind?" The black deacon on the right was infuriated. He gritted his teeth and cursed, "Ji Tianqing, you little bastard. He's so arrogant that he's out of control. Based on your arrogant words, I will definitely kill you tonight." As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed deacon took the initiative to attack. He waved his palm and a dazzling flaming palm shadow blasted toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing stared at him expressionlessly. He seemed to casually raise his left palm, and similarly release the surging scarlet flame true fire to meet his palm head-on. Boom! The 2 flaming palms collided with a loud bang and burst into flames, illuminating the night sky within 100 meters. The black-robed deacon let out a blood-curdling scream as he was sent flying backwards. He spat out a mouthful of blood as he crashed onto the stone steps. His whole body was burning with raging flames. His robe and flesh were burned by the red deacon's true fire. The other black deacon was enraged. His face was distorted with anger. He didn't care about the reason anymore. He roared and rushed toward Ji Tianqing. "You're courting death, you evil creature. Kill him." The Black Deacon pulled out his sword and stabbed out 36 dazzling sword lights that shrouded Ji Tianqing's body. When the 16 guards received the order, they didn't hesitate to use their ultimate skills, brandishing their swords and attacking Ji Tianqing. Swish! 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 In that instant, hundreds of dazzling sword lights tore through the dark night, illuminating everything within a 100-meter radius. Hundreds of sharp sword lights were like a huge sword net that shrouded Ji Tianqing. He had nowhere to hide. Within 100 meters, the sword qi was everywhere. Even the air was cut by the sharp and domineering sword qi. Being surrounded by so many powerful warriors, Ji Tianqing was not afraid at all. With an expressionless face, he shouted, "Flowing light sword net." He used all of his power to activate the sword embryo, releasing 36 streaks of sword radiance. They circled around his body and formed a golden sword net. Swish! 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 The 36 sword lights split into 108 sword lights, making the golden sword net impenetrable. It emitted a sharp sword intent that soared to the sky. Hundreds of sword lights slashed down and hit the sword net from all directions. Bang! 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 Muffled sounds were heard. The deafening sound spread out in all directions and woke up all the martial artists on the mountain. The violent and raging energy exploded, shattering the bluestone steps on the spot and sending gravel flying everywhere. After the multicolored true essence light dissipated, everyone was able to clearly see that the sword net was still intact. Ji Tianqing stood proudly in the middle of the field. He wasn't hurt at all. He had blocked the full attack of more than a dozen experts. The 2 black-robed deacons and the 16 guards widened their eyes in shock. They couldn't believe it. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing waved his palms and performed a sword art. Bright golden light gushed out of his palms, shatter the mountains and rivers. Along with his cold and emotionless roar, golden light and flames surged out of his body. He emitted a murderous aura that soared to the sky. In the next moment, he turned into a golden shadow and teleported within 50 meters. He waved his palms and released golden light and flaming sword lights that covered the sky. Swish! 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 In just one breath, he had released thousands of sword lights and sealed off the area within 50 meters. The 2 black-robed deacons and the 16 guards looked at the sword lights in shock. They even forgot to run. At the same time, thousands of golden light and flaming sword lights exploded with their strongest power. Boom! Amidst the earth-shaking explosions, the area within a radius of 50 meters was filled with golden light and flames. It became extremely turbid and chaotic. Half of the mountain was illuminated. The ground within a few hundred meters was shaking violently. The tyrannical and violent sword radiance shattered the bluestone steps, turning them into millions of stone fragments. More than a dozen guards were also sliced into pieces by the sword light, their physical bodies turning into powder. Even the 2 black-robed guards with the strongest strengths were minced into a mess, and they transformed into severed limbs and blood that scattered all over the surroundings. After a few breaths, the golden light and flames gradually dissipated. The huge battle gradually calmed down. The green stone steps within 50 meters had completely disappeared. The 2 deacons and the 16 guards had also disappeared. A huge pit was left in the ground. The pit was filled with dust, stone chips, dark red blood, and some body parts. Ji Tianqing had already left. He was on the stone steps 100 meters away. His white robe was still not stained with blood. His steps were firm, and he walked toward the peak of the mountain step by step. At this moment, he was like the god of death. No one could stop him from rescuing Yun Yao. After a while, he crossed thousands of steps and arrived at the mountainside. There was a square with a radius of 1,000 meters on the mountainside. On both sides of the square were the outer sanctum of the Tianjian sect. The battle just now had already awakened everyone on the mountain, including thousands of outer sanctum disciples. When Ji Tianqing stepped on the outer sanctum square, hundreds of people had gathered there. Chapter 444. Even though there were almost 100 martial artists in the outer court plaza, they were all seething with killing intent, and their gazes were filled with hatred and resentment as they stared at Ji Tianqing, wishing for nothing more than to tear him into pieces. However, Ji Tianqing's ferocious might and the killing intent emitted from his entire body actually intimidated them to the point they didn't dare act rashly. Over 100 people stared at Ji Tianqing with a heart filled with vigilance, yet no one dared to make the first move. Ji Tianqing faced over 100 martial artists by himself, and his shapeless aura enveloped the entire plaza, actually suppressing everyone to the point they felt fearful and anxious in their hearts. On the peak of the mountain, there were 3 figures that were enveloped in true essence lights, and they were charging down swiftly like bolts of lightning. The strength of those 3 people had already surpassed the 7th level of the Origin Core stage, and they were obviously the elders of the Tianjian sect. After a short few breaths of time, the 3 purple-robed Tianjian sect elders arrived at the outer court plaza like a bolt of lightning. When the nearly 100 martial artists in the plaza saw the arrival of the 3 elders, they instantly gained their backbone and confidence. Everyone withdrew their vigilant postures, and they stared at Ji Tianqing with faces filled with killing intent as they revealed disdainful and cruel sneers. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! The figures of the 3 purple-robed elders flickered as they stood at the center of the plaza, and they stared angrily at Ji Tianqing. The person in the lead was the Tianjian sect's 3rd elder. The purple-robed man on the left was the outer court's elder Master Tang. The gray-haired old man on the right was the Tianjian sect's discipline hall's elder. Coincidentally, during the Dragon Mountain competition a few months ago, Elder Master Tang and the discipline elder personally guarded Dragon Mountain and supervised the competition on the spot. Both of them witnessed the scene of Ji Tianqing defeating Hang Chen with their own eyes, and they'd long since hated Ji Tianqing to the bone. The Tianjian sect's 3rd elder was the first to speak, and he shouted with a low and icy cold voice, "Ji Tianqing, you indiscriminately slaughtered the innocent, an executioner full of evil. The Sky Pillar sect is tyrannical and domineering. They bully our Tianjian sect in every possible way. Our sect has endured it time and time again. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant and brutal. You broke into my Tianjian sect in the middle of the night and cruelly massacred our sect's disciples. Are you trying to force our sect to declare war on the Sky Pillar sect? Tonight, I will definitely sever your head from your body and use your worthless life to pay tribute to the dead disciples of my sect." The incomparable anger made the 3rd elder's face turn ashen. His entire body trembled, and the murderous aura surging all over his body appeared to be a dark red flame. Ji Tianqing stared at him indifferently and said coldly, "You old dog, you don't need to talk nonsense, and you don't need to play dumb with me. You know very well why I went to the Tianjian sect in the middle of the night. I only have one request. Get Gao Yi to come out and see me, or hand over our sect's chief disciple, Yun Yao." Hearing this, the 3rd elder furrowed his brows, and a strange cold light flashed in his eyes. He glared at Ji Tianqing and cursed with murderous intent, "You arrogant thief! You're really brainless. How laughable! Why is your Sky Pillar sect's chief disciple in our sect? Could it be that you're tired of living, so you randomly made up an excuse to come to the Tianjian sect to die?" Despite the 3rd elder's foul language and curses, Ji Tianqing's face remained cold and his eyes were indifferent. Of course, he was angry. However, he disdained to express his anger and murderous intent with foul language. Only by using the lives and blood of the Tianjian sect's people could his anger and murderous intent be quelled. He looked coldly at the 3rd elder and said in a deep voice, 2 days ago, an elder of the Tianjian sect came to our sect and delivered a letter of challenge. The Tianjian sect's new chief disciple, Tuoba Rue, wants to challenge Yun Yao on the star platform. 2 days have passed, but Yun Yao hasn't returned. Our sect's elders went to the star platform to investigate the situation, but there was no one there. Do you still want to play dumb with me? After listening to Ji Tianqing's words, the 3 elders, the many deacons, and the guards all frowned and looked startled. The 3rd elder was the first to recover. He immediately flew into a rage and cursed with a ferocious expression, "Ji Tianqing, you damn bastard! Are you crazy or have you lost your mind? When did our sect send a letter of challenge? You killed Xueqi, and his corpse hasn't even turned cold yet. Our sect also hasn't appointed a new chief disciple. Who is this Tuoba Rue? This king has never heard of him." Ji Tianqing stared at him. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. "Hehehe. Do you think you can shirk all responsibility by pretending that you don't know anything? The person who sent the letter of challenge is the great elder of the Tianjian sect. Gao Yi's seal is also on the letter of challenge. I don't want to talk nonsense with you. Get out of my way." Before coming to the Tianjian sect, Ji Tianqing was still analyzing and speculating whether there was something fishy about this matter. Now he was sure that this was a conspiracy of the Tianjin sect. The person who sent the letter of challenge was the Tianjin sect's great elder. The letter of challenge had the seal of the Tianjin sect's sect leader. This couldn't be faked. But now, the Tianjin sect's elder was pretending to be confused and refused to admit it. Moreover, he had already gone to the Tianjin sect. Why hadn't the great elder and Gao Yi appeared? All signs pointed to the Tianjin sect's conspiracy that Yun Yao's disappearance was caused by Yun Yao's conspiracy. The third elder's face turned blue after being scolded by Ji Tianqing, but he was speechless and didn't know how to refute. Elder Master Tang of the Outer Sanctum immediately stood up. He stared at Ji Tianqing and cursed with resentment. Ji Tianqing, don't you dare make irresponsible remarks and fabricate nonsense here. What does Yun Yao's disappearance have to do with our sect? Maybe she ran away with some wild man? What right do you have to ask our sect for her? When Elder Master Tang's words blurted out, the entire Outer Sanctum square went silent for a moment. Ji Tianqing's body shook. His pupils shrank, and his face became extremely cold. At this moment, anger that could burn the heavens and the earth surged out of his chest. A murderous aura that could shake the 9 heavens erupted from his body. The entire Outer Sanctum square was shrouded in an invisible murderous aura. The air seemed to freeze, and the temperature dropped to the freezing point. Ji Tianqing stared at Elder Master Tang and uttered 3 words in a low and hoarse voice. You deserve to die. As his voice fell, his whole body ignited with golden flames that soared to the sky. His body merged with the golden light and turned into a giant golden sword that slashed towards Elder Master Tang. This giant golden sword was 10 meters long and contained the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. It was surrounded by golden flames that soared to the sky. The dazzling golden light actually condensed into a huge white tiger phantom. The white tiger opened its bloody mouth and stretched out its huge front claws. It was like a mythological beast that descended from the sky to destroy the world. This move was the sacred sword of the 4 spirits that Kenshin had used. Ji Tianqing's cultivation was still shallow. He couldn't use the sacred sword of the 4 spirits like Kenshin, and could only release the sacred sword of the white tiger. But even so, it was enough to kill Elder Master Tang. Whoosh! The sacred sword of the white tiger cut through the dark night and instantly traversed hundreds of meters in the night sky, drowning Elder Master Tang's figure. Nobody could react in time. Elder Master Tang had no time to dodge, and the 2 elders had no chance to intercept it. Boom! Chapter 445. Bang! A deafening loud noise spread out in an area of a few dozen miles. The outer court square within a radius of 1,000 meters was enveloped by a dazzling golden light, becoming dazzling and resplendent. Elder Master Tang was blasted into pieces by the white tiger sacred sword on the spot. His fleshly body shattered into millions of pieces that mixed with a rain of blood and sprinkled onto the square. An enormous crater with a radius of 100 meters was blasted out of the ground of the square that was paved with rocks. The entire square was violently trembling, and with the enormous crater as the center, dense ravines split open in all directions. Dust and gravel flew everywhere, and the sky above the square was instantly chaotic. The violent golden light shockwave exploded out and swept through the entire square. The 3rd elder and disciplinary elder who were closest to Elder Master Tang were blasted flying on the spot and tumbled 100 steps away. The 2 of them hadn't even gotten up from the ground when they opened their mouths and spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. The close to 100 martial artists that were gathered on the square were blasted into a mess by the destructive shockwave and suffered heavy casualties. Everyone was blasted flying and scattered around the square like sandbags. Most of the disciples and guards with weaker strengths were heavily injured by the shockwave and fell on the ground covered in blood. Over 20 true element stage outer court disciples were directly killed by the shockwave and lost their lives on the spot. Only a few black-robed deacons who possessed strength at the origin core stage and were further away from Elder Master Tang were not heavily injured by the shockwave. After a long time, the white tiger sacred sword disappeared, and the golden light and dust that filled the sky dissipated. The square recovered its clarity, and only then did everyone return to their senses. They saw that the entire square was shattered as if a super earthquake had occurred, and there was even an enormous crater in the center. The 3rd elder and disciplinary elder were both injured, and Elder Master Tang was nowhere to be seen. He died without a complete corpse. After seeing the result clearly, everyone was filled with astonishment, and they looked at Ji Tianqing with fearful gazes as dense shock arose in their hearts. Everyone was unable to believe that Ji Tianqing was actually able to execute such a terrifying and peerless sword technique and blasted Elder Master Tang into pieces with a single sword strike. Elder Master Tang was a 7th-level Origin Core stage expert. Could it be that Ji Tianqing had already surpassed the Yuan Dan stage and reached the Tian Yuan stage? This question popped up in everyone's mind. Ji Tianqing stood in the middle of the square, at the edge of the huge pit. The night wind blew, blowing at his white robe and golden wings, causing his clothes to flutter. He exuded a domineering aura of an expert. His expression was still indifferent, and his eyes were gloomy like ice. His entire body was suffused with terrifying killing intent. That sword strike just now did not consume too much true essence. He glanced at the third elder and the disciplinary elder with an indifferent gaze. His figure flashed as he crossed the deep pit and walked towards the peak. The two elders were both shocked and aghast. Their faces were twisted with anger, and their bodies were trembling. Too arrogant. How lawless. Everyone, listen up. Kill Ji Tianqing at all costs. If you want to step into the Divine Sword Palace, then you have to step over our dead bodies. The third elder and the disciplinary elder shouted angrily as they gave their orders. As soon as they finished speaking, the two of them drew their treasured swords. Their bodies emitted a dazzling brilliance of true essence, and they disregarded their own safety as they swung their swords towards Ji Tianqing. The few black-robed deacons and more than 10 guards who were lightly injured also executed their sword techniques with all their might, slashing out sword lights that covered the sky as they surrounded and attacked Ji Tianqing from all sides. Instantly, Ji Tianqing was surrounded by the two elders and 20 experts. Over 100 violent and fierce sword lights descended from the sky like a rain of arrows, pouring down towards him and drowning his figure. Ji Tianqing was surrounded, but his expression did not change as he shouted coldly, "Those who block me, die." He condensed an oval-shaped shield with his true essence and unfolded his golden wings to protect himself, blocking the besiegement of the sword lights that covered the sky. Over 100 sword lights pierced his true essence shield and wings one after another, producing a bang-bang-bang sound. Countless sword lights were shattered, but his true essence shield and wings were still unharmed. Water split. Ji Tianqing let out a low roar and unleashed all of his power. He unleashed a 20-meter-long sword aura and slashed toward the crowd. Boom! A huge golden sword light descended from the sky and slashed into the crowd, creating a huge trench that was 3 meters wide and about 100 meters long. 8 guards were killed on the spot, and 2 deacons were severely injured as they were sent flying with blood all over their bodies. Even the third elder and the disciplinary elder were forced to retreat, not daring to resist at all. Shatter the mountains and rivers. Ji Tianqing used the flying star sword technique again as his figure shuttled back and forth within a 100-step radius, releasing over 1,000 violent sword lights. Boom! The power of all the sword lights exploded at the same time, turning into a monstrous golden light and flames that filled the space within a 100-step radius. The few guards and deacons who were lucky enough to survive were killed on the spot by the sword lights, turning into a rain of blood that fell to the ground. The 2 elders were also heavily injured. Their bodies were covered with crisscrossing wounds, and blood kept gushing out, soaking their robes. In the blink of an eye, the square became empty. Over 100 disciples, guards, and deacons were either dead or disabled. No one could participate in the battle anymore. Only the third elder and the disciplinary elder were left standing in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, you're a crazy executioner. A demon. Even if we die here, we will defend the dignity of the Tianjin sect. We will not allow you to blaspheme it. The third elder and the disciplinary elder both roared hysterically, cursing out in rage. Ignoring their own injuries, the two of them exploded with all their strength and attacked Ji Tianqing from both sides, using their most powerful killing moves. Dual Sword Combination. Azure Rainbow Fatal Blow. This sword technique was one of the unique skills of the Tianjin sect, and it was also a joint attack technique of the powerful swordsman. When the two elders worked together, they could explode with double the power and defeat a strong enemy who was at a higher level than them. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 azure rainbow sword lights that were more than 10 meters long appeared, illuminating the entire square. The violent sword essence and strength chi blew up a hurricane in the square, sweeping up gravel and dust in the air. The azure rainbow dual swords, with the power to destroy everything, tore through the dark night sky, and instantly arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. The powerful sword chi sealed off a 10-meter radius around Ji Tianqing, suppressing him fiercely. There was nowhere for him to hide. He could only block and bear the attack of the Azure Rainbow dual swords. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing stood still with a cold expression on his face as he stared at the Azure Rainbow swords. When the two giant swords were in front of him, he suddenly opened his wide golden wings and folded them in front of him, blocking his body. Wings of the Golden Rock. Boom! The Azure Rainbow dual swords exploded with destructive power and stabbed Ji Tianqing's golden wings almost at the same time, creating a loud explosion that shook the sky. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.